Yeah, we're live. Hi, guys.
So if you think you've got it all, that's just teaser information.
Says six. Conspiracy Part 2 is out. Hot off the presses. How are you doing, Gary? Glad to have you here.
Well, doing very well, and thank you for inviting me to your podcast. And looking forward to conversation today. And I'm not sure how many of your listeners are aware of me, but if we do things right,
Hi, Diane. Hi, Phil. Good to see you guys.
Raise a few eyebrows today.
Yeah. I think it says it all in the title, right? Genesis 6 conspiracy. It's like stuff you don't hear about in churches mostly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm so blessed to have you on, and I know my audience will love it. And,
My tablet's playing up. I've got to reboot the reply, guys.
But I'll be getting the second one ASAP because it's hot off the presses and it has nothing but 5-star reviews so far on Amazon.com. So yeah, can you tell people where the best place to get your book is?
Sure. The easiest way to get a hold of my book is through my website, through the Genesis6conspiracy.com. That's the number 6conspiracy.com. And on that website, I have a generous excerpt of all 84 chapters of book 2 and all 98 chapters of book 1. So they are, loaded with information. There's a generous excerpt up there. It's just a drop in the bucket as to what's in the book. So if you think you've got it all, that's just teaser information.
Yeah.
And it never stops coming at you. So yeah, so that's
book 1.
That's book 1. And there's over 100 pages of endnotes there. But book 2's got a little bit different format because it has all the annotations, all the footnotes on the same page. Because book 2 is a little bit different approach than book 1. So book 1 is written from a significant Christian biases, but one of the things I wanted to do there was sort of make Christians aware of how the world works that we live in. And I have a lot of outside information in their own testimony, and I let them speak in their own words because I don't think people to say that, hey, you manipulated it. So I give you the words, I give you the source, you can verify it for yourself, and how that intersects with the Bible. So
my tablet went down. I had to reboot the tablet.
We also cover off, their perspective of prehistory.
Yeah,
what they've done over
I love
our
that about
history.
the book because I'm almost halfway through, and I love that because it takes the true history of where did we get all this crap from.
Yeah, it'll help you understand the whole world, and it starts to get you into the understanding of we need to understand prehistory to understand prophecy. It's the full context for the creation of the Adamites and how things are going to play out. So the principles and the values are awesome in the Bible, absolutely, and what we teach in Christianity, but they're taught without the context of prehistory and prophecy. So book 1 is kind of one of the most unique books that may be out on the marketplace. And it is something in the genre that is absolutely unique. There's nothing out there like it. And it's a 6,000-year investigation into the House of Dragon, the visible ones.
Okay, Diane, he's talking about the Rockefeller guy who disappeared in New Guinea. He's talking about him.
On the earth. And it gives you some information as to the invisible ones as well. So book 2, I wasn't good. I wasn't good writing.
Talk about first one, the book 1. I really love the balance there, because what people in all corners of the world and different perspectives have the tendency to do is once they get a hold of the truth, it's extremely this way with it or extremely against it. And I always find God's always like in the middle and the truth is in there. So I love how you have the balance of showing it everything under that context.
Well, because we need to understand how God is letting things play out. I mean, he can intercede, he does intercede, but he only intercedes to make sure all the names in the book of life have an opportunity to keep their name in the book of life and not have it blotted out. So that intercession is only done to make sure all of those names that were created and written before creation have that opportunity. So if we want to understand why God lets things go on in the world, we have to understand he believes in free choice in this epoch for sure, and I would think ongoing, although the consequences after would suggest that you might be foolish not to go with God's ways, which as we see being played out on the earth, only leads to...
Yeah, Diane, but the only rich person I know that got eaten by cannibals was the Rockefeller that disappeared. And there actually is news on what happened to him. He was cannibalized. I think that's where Biden's getting this from.
Destruction if you're not following God's ways.
Yeah.
And so if we want to understand why things go on in the world, we have to understand that there's a limited time to fill all those names in the book of life. And God is Alpha Omega, as is Jesus, and they knew everything that was going to happen.
Yeah, but Diane, he probably thinks it was his uncle.
But they love the spirits that they created so much from before creation that they'll be patient and let the rebellious ones and the spurious ones convict themselves, because it's all through free choice. And just as angels had free choice to choose God or not, they knew God intimately, many chose to rebel. And according to end time prophecy, as many as a third will have rebelled. Whether they all rebelled at the beginning in pieces, that's really kind of irrelevant. It's just we have a final number, and we know it's a large number because in both Revelations and Daniel it talks about 10,000 times 10,000 angels, which is 100 million, and then other references to the angels is they're uncountable. So that could be just an allegorical number and be bigger, right? So, but if it is 100,000 and a third rebel, that means depending on how you want to make that third, it's either 33 million or 50 million.
Yeah.
It's a lot, and not all of them are in the pit prison.
Yeah, and it's important that it's 1/3, still 2/3 for us.
Still 2/3 that are loyal, but things are being played out so that the lake of fire that was created for them will be played out, and they will convict themselves. So yeah, it's important to understand that humankind, the reason why we're going to be raised above angels is because we were created mortal. Yes, Adam had access to the tree of life until the deception in the garden, but in the physical world, that was where that immortal life would be versus in heaven. And so it's important to understand that humans were created mortal and without intimate knowledge of God. And thus, through faith,
find it out for yourself and have that free will choice.
That free will choice to secure that information yourself and not have it all or most of it. And certainly the angels did not have all the secrets or wisdom of God. As First Corinthians talks about, the princes, the archangels of the world were aware of the resurrection, they would not have insisted or assured that Jesus was crucified, right? Yeah. Because that basically ended their rebellion. Yeah, it was, yes, there still was some time to be played out, but I think that's who he went to speak to the ones in the pit prison while he was in the grave in First Peter. So I think it's important to understand that we're going to be raised higher than angels in eternity as inheritors of eternity, and that we're going to judge those angels for their crimes against us and crimes against the earth.
Inheritance that we have, I think it just blows my mind of what it says in Ephesians, that we have an inheritance to give him from our free will little mortal lives in this little time that we're here on earth.
Yeah.
And it's a gift.
And we're also assured that God is going to write on our hearts And so one deduces within the spirits that we'll have more control over the soul and the body in an uncorrupted world in eternity, that we'll be able to follow the ways of God and not have to worry about stumbling. And of course, in the meantime, we are all sinful and we all stumble, but that's why the Alpha Omega plan was always about, if things played out through free choice, that and inevitably that they knew how it would play out, that you would have to send Jesus as the Redeemer to ensure that the sins would be forgiven and we could be raised into eternity. To be like angels, but even though we have human fathers.
Good news, Phil.
Yeah, man, it's truly glorious.
Good news,
what
mate.
He's giving us in this little short life frame. And then you have extreme one side. Oh, come, Jesus, come. And it's like his time is mercy. It's giving more time for those who are not yet awakened to awaken to the true reality that's being played out here.
Yes, and so we should view the creation of Adamites as, in my opinion and my understanding, and I'm not a minister, I'm just a researcher. So I think the Adamites were created as the resolution to the angelic rebellion that will play out in the ordained time when it's reserved for. So yes, this is how we get that opportunity that God knew would come along, but it has to play out that way. So there's perfect justification for those who are going to be resurrected, and perfect justification who will receive the second death, and perfect justification for those who are going to remain in the lake of fire forever.
Yeah, and the beauty and the glory of how he made us too, even though we're weak in our mortal frames, he made us in his image.
Yes.
And I think, like, we're, just my opinion, I'll throw out my opinion, we're made unlike, I think, any other creation that's listed that we have to go by, in being able to relate to the uncreated God, because we're made in his image.
Yep.
And so we have those capacities, those wide range of emotions, because he does. We have mental capacities with the different facets of our human nature, our man-like nature, because we're made in his image.
Yeah, and the things that God creates and allows and permits, whether it's emotions or it's knowledge, is not evil. It's neither good nor evil. It's how those things are applied. So, and you have to have the discipline and the wisdom to apply those things, which we tend to lack at this point in time. But the point of it is that I think in this experience is to have the spirit to do the best that you can, understanding you're going to fall short, because nobody is in the same classification as Jesus, who came into a corrupt world and never sinned. I mean, it's just a standard that is only, the word of God, or as I like to say, the logos of the Theos, or the Jehovah of the Elohim has the ability to do. So, and he did it for us. And I just can't imagine the Word who created all things knew from the beginning that how it was going to play out, and he would have to come and suffer the way that he did. But yet he did it willingly, and it wasn't easy. I mean, he was crying out from the cross to Abba, his father.
And even before that, what was that about with the tears that he knew he was going in the Garden of Gethsemane, the tears with blood, and the sweating of blood and stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I heard an interesting take.
Hey, Johnny, good to see you.
Chuck Missler.
Hey, Jay, good to see you, mate.
Paul situation, and what he saw, what God could have seen in us, and his plan to redeem us through his son. And we're also referred to as his bride, and Jesus as the bridegroom.
Yes.
And so Adam being the bride and Eve being the bride, or Adam being the bridegroom and Eve being the bride, when she fell, he was like, well, what if it happened like this? Because we're not given much in the translation what actually transformed or happened. Mm-hmm. But what if it happened to where
that's cool, Shawnee.
She messed up and came running to Adam, and Adam saw that and knew that he would be separate from her. Yeah. And he said, I'm going with you, kind of babe. Like, I'm not going to leave you alone, and took a bite of the apple as well.
Yeah, we're not really told that, but somehow Adam is persuaded, whether it's to not be separated or to understand the additional knowledge or not. So we're not really told explicitly or detailed as to what was going through the heads, and we're not told why Eve would be susceptible to wanting to be like God.
Right.
I guess it's enticing if somebody were to offer that to you. But they didn't have knowledge of good and evil at that point in time either.
Right.
So they were being persuaded by evil.
Yeah,
and
it's
not
just like a little kid, they don't know, they don't have that filter of right and wrong yet.
Yeah.
It's only set in standard by their mother and father,
Yeah. So, and the difference is after Eden is we know there's evil in the world, and yet we're still seduced by the same temptations.
Yeah.
And that's one of the ultimate lessons. And, even in the millennium, after the end time, there is going to be people who are going to rebel. And I think that's a time that is set aside, for the completion of the names in the book of life.
Diane, Sydney's going through a slew of knives attacks. There's been massacres, there's been priests stabbed, and now you're saying someone went on a stabbing rampage there. I reckon an eclipse released the devil that encourages people to stab people. I think that's what's going on here.
Because it's obviously the earth is going to be repopulated and being from almost completely wiped out. And that I think that is a time where it's to show humans that we are no better than the angels.
Right.
That just as the angels knew God and Jesus intimately,
right,
so will we as he rules on earth. And yet there will be a rebellion after Satan is released after 1,000 years. So I think it's just everything is covered off in the patience and the love that God has to sit through all these horrible things that he knew would transpire, but he wants us to choose whether angelic or human, him. And it's the only way that it's sustainable going into eternity.
Yeah, and I just love that perspective that that minister Chuck Missler had on it, because that sounds more like God, like us in the image of God too. Yeah. Not wanting to be separated from this amazing, beautiful being that he just made from Adam's rib and said, you guys are going to be fruitful, multiply, do all this together, and him having love and wanting to fall for it. And I could see God being like, I'm going to save him.
Yeah, and Mr. Missler was a very, very intelligent and researched and informative people. I would encourage people to seek out his books and writings and read those. They're all worthwhile. Yeah, I've not read all of them, but I've read several, and I have a few in my library behind me. So.
Yeah, he's a great man of God, great gift, that's for sure to us. Yeah, but it's just, if you can kind of give the context for those who have maybe never heard of Genesis 6 and like, what are these guys talking about? Maybe we can lay some ground for that, because I know a lot of people a lot of people still may not have heard of that. And then you get the extremes, right? You get the people, oh yeah, it all went bad here, and then go crazy. And I love the way your book just puts out facts from all angles.
Yeah.
History and religions and all of that.
Yeah. So one of the concepts of book one is that there is a worldwide legacy that talks about the same type of events in prehistory and history, and with their own prophecy from different cultures and religions through a polytheist lens versus the monotheist lens that we would view things. And it's important to understand that. So when we talk about this legacy, it's in all cultures, on all continents, all around the world. But we get the truth, the unmanipulated truth in the Bible versus the polytheist biases. Versus, you could call it a Christian biases, but I would say biases of truth. But I am biased. So, and so Genesis 6 is talked about right around the world, in all cultures, in all continents, in all religions, and it's the flood story. And what's interesting though is the preamble to the flood story. And in the preamble, bookended by the genealogy that finishes in chapter 5 with Noah and his.
Diane, there was a bit more on the news about that flood in Dubai, Saudi Arabia, and the airport being underwater. Do you think that's the water event Mike from around the world was talking about? Because it seems to be sort of pretty specific about water.
3 sons. You have 4 really discombobulating passages that
Yeah,
when
that's
I first
big,
read, when I wanted
6.3.
to research prophecy because I wanted to know whether Hal Lindsey was accurate or not, and I had to start to log things in the Bible. Every time I would get to Genesis 6 verses 1 through 4, I'm going, whatever they're talking about with giants, I don't want anything to do. That's crazy talk. So, but eventually in doing the research on prophecy, I understand there's a relationship to fallen angels, giants, and demons, and we need to understand that. And so I started to log some of that and to try and become familiar with what the heck are giants doing in the Bible.
Yeah.
So this says the sons of God who are going to go to human females and create giants, or some of the English translations will mean Nephilim, will be translated as Nephilim. That is the transliterated word out of Hebrew. And some people think it doesn't mean giant.
Yeah, I was just going to hint at that because people will take, oh, well, it says the sons of God. Well, it kind of alleviates that when it says come into the daughters of men.
Yeah, you would think, but it's because there are other references in the Old Testament to the sons of God or children of God, as it refers to Israel, in some prophecies for the end time, not for the flood, in Hosea and the book of Isaiah, which is perfectly consistent with the understanding of the sons of God as humans in the New Testament that comes because of the crucifixion and implemented as doctrine at the time of the Pentecost, that we will be resurrected to be like angels in the future time. So it's prophetic. It's not have anything to do with the Old Testament. So when we look at the word in book 2, we'll talk more about it later, but I was convinced to write book 2 because Christians seem to require even more information. And so book 2 is written directly at Christians. And I said I would never write a sequel, but the demand for wanting to know all the things about angels and giants and demons and prophecy.
It's great that the Christians' curiosity got him to do the second book then, isn't it?
In the Bible sort of had me drop the book I was writing to write book 2, and then I'll back to writing that other book. So how do we know that sons of God are humans? And one of the things that people can also do, I'll just throw this out, and I have a great document. If you go to the website, contact the author.
Wow.
Ask for the documents and how we know the sons of God are angels, and or I'll send you both anyways, and how we know the sons of God are not humans. So I'll give you both biblically based arguments, and I put that all in book 2 as well, so you've got it all there. So
Cool.
Yeah, we have some passages of the sons of God elsewhere that we can kind of rely on.
Right.
And so you have Job 1:6 and 2:1 that talks about the sons of God who went to present themselves at the throne of God in heaven, not as on earth, as some people would change the meaning of that. And I get that could God set up a throne on earth? Sure, he could. Right?
Yeah, but that's what he's coming to do when he makes all things new later.
Yeah, but we don't have scripture for that.
Right.
So I would encourage people not to add on to scripture. And if you do, say you're speculating. So angels are required to report, and Satan reports at the same time. He's a fallen one, but he has a special obligation even after he's been degraded versus some of the other fallen angels that went to the pit prison before and after the flood. So we have sons of God used there. So I understand that's an argument. But if you get the same understanding, the same term in the same book as in the book of Job, that would be something that you could not make an excuse for, that these are humans, or rationalize is a better word, that these are humans. I would go to Job 38, 4-7, where it says the morning stars are understood as an order of angels, as I will talk about in book 2, and stars are an allegory for angels, and the sons of God sang for joy at creation. Well, we were not there at creation.
No.
Only the angels were, as Psalms 104 talks about.
Right.
And so we have that, but still there's another passage that's interesting, is we have the council of the gods in Psalms 82, the sons of the Most High. And again, that's the same term, only for the fallen angels, again, just as you can have sons of God that are loyal angels and sons of God that are the fallen ones. And these are the fallen ones in their assembly that Satan sits atop of, that rules over the 70 nations, both before and after the flood.
Yeah.
And so we get that as, but still, I know it's hard when you have this cognizant dissonance in your brain about these giants, and what you've been told in the churches, who want to avoid the topic like crazy. I don't know why, because the Bible is the most preternatural book ever written. Why you would accept some of the preternatural stories and not others is kind of not consistent, but it is what it is. So there are other ways we can know that the sons of God are angels, is because biblically, and you notice I haven't gone to extracurricular
Stuff yet.
passages. So, and if I do use it, I measure it against what the Bible says.
Yep. Yeah, because it
And
was
if
quoted. If you're talking about Enoch, it was quoted in the Bible. You know.
Sure, absolutely. And he used the term sons of God there. I will put that in a detailed way in book 2, but for the sake of keeping it to what's in the Bible,
Right.
if people who are really pushing back on, I would say
wrestling with it in their conceptions and perception.
There are passages in the Old Testament where stars are used with angels, as in the sons of God in Job 38. There are stars and the host of heaven, as in Daniel 8, where you have some of the starry host who are trampled on by Antichrist in the end time. You have angels and the host of heaven, and stars as being accounted as fallen angelic beings that people worship on earth in the Old Testament. So you have the circular arguments supporting the different descriptions of who the sons of God were understood as in the time of the flood. And these were the rebellious ones who, in their second revenge, as I talk about in book 1, versus the first revenge, which was by Satan in Eden to bring down Adam, now he's going to create spurious offspring by deceiving his followers as fallen angels to procreate something that is a violation against the Holy Spirit, violation against the laws of creation, to be the terrible ones, as they're described in Ezekiel 32 and Isaiah 14 and Isaiah 25 and other passages, as these terrible ones who are going to do terrible things to humankind. They're there to wipe humankind from the face of the earth.
Yeah, they hate us. They hate God's image in us. And the funny thing is like, so how do you equate that then? If you think sons of God are, if you just say you think they are man, even though it says came into the daughters of men after sons of God, how does that create a giant?
Yeah,
because God did not create that in the original order.
Well, in the argument that comes back, I've had.
I bet you have. That's all.
I get them all, and you need to be able to answer them all, right?
Fair enough.
Which is important, because we don't want to take the Bible out of its understanding,
right?
Pro or for against giants. We won't want it to be what the Bible actually says, and so I mean, you can't do extraordinary things as a human. You can't be larger, or you can't have additional powers. And what happens with the transference of DNA from the angels when they take a bodily form is that they pass on gifts. So what's interesting in Genesis 6:3, one of the gifts is immortality of the body and of the Xerox, so to speak, counterfeit spirit.
Diane, I think they used that dead body to vote for Biden too last election.
Passed on by the fallen angels that you
Hi,
have created
Oz,
gods
never
within
here.
the
Good to
physical
see ya.
world. Kind of what Satan was also offering Adam and Eve, right?
You should be like God.
Yeah, pretty much identical. And there's this knowledge that I talk about that's part of the mystical religions that comes out of the seven sciences created by Enoch, son of Cain, and there's two Enochs
Can you
in the
touch on
Bible.
that?
Yeah, well, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Otherwise,
I'm young, well, Oz, never here. How you
It's
going?
amazing.
They're all
man. I just love it.
interesting. So
Yeah.
that they're creating these immortal bodies and these immortal spirits. Now the spirit is immortal, so it can't be killed in a way that we would understand it.
Right.
And
they're not
so-
going to be dealt with till the final judgment. You're right.
Now, in one of the great manipulations of prehistory that is taught is that 120 years was the commission of Noah to build the ark. Except the math doesn't work. And I don't believe Alpha Omega would make a math error, or there would be written down as a math error. So if you look at the verses, I won't go through all of the verses right now, but if you go through the verses, you understand that from the time of the birth of the sons to the time Noah enters the ark is 100 years, not 120.
Yeah, doing good here
And if you look
too.
at the language and you take that back to the Hebrew, it's clearly talking about the spirit isn't going to be, his spirit isn't going to be in the world permanently.
Man forever.
Yeah. Right? So he's going to say the bodies, the soul and the body, which are part of the physical world, and the spirit comes from heaven. And then when a human dies, the soul and body is what decays in this world, and our spirit, according to Ecclesiastes, goes back to heaven and in a sleep-like state. As we're told, we sleep hundreds and hundreds of times in the Bible. But the counterfeit spirit isn't permitted to sleep, but the body dies. And it becomes the disembodied spirits. And we see these show up as devil spirits in the New Testament that Jesus is talking about.
Going to and fro throughout the dry places of the earth. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're also referenced in the same context as unclean spirits and evil spirits, but they're used interchangeably in these accounts.
Yep.
And so when we look at that word devil, it's not a fallen angel that is doing this. The word is daemon. The word for devil, yeah, the word for devil, as it's associated with Satan, is diablos.
Diablos.
And you never have daemon associated with Satan. So these are daemon spirits, which is the Greek word, source word for demon in English.
Yeah. Disembodied spirit.
These are the disembodied spirits.
Which are not the same as fallen angel spirits.
Yes. And so they are either going to, in the occult belief, make it to the occult heaven where the fallen angels, not in the pit prison, rule from. In Hades, Sheol, the other world, and when Argatha, the 10,000 different names they have there for it.
Yeah.
And we see that in the occult rituals, whether it's the Egyptians sailing on a boat into the other world, or in the Ugaritic texts where the Rephaim are going to take these dead kings into the other world through a portal, and all around the world. It's the same sort of ritual.
They
So whether they
crack up
get
at you when you say, "Oh, you're a Satan worshiper," and then just crack up at you, and they're thinking, "No, I worship Ein Sof." And it's like, "Wait a minute, who's Ein Sof? Oh,
Yeah.
he's a snake in a tree. Who's that sound like?"
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And Satan has many different names.
Yep.
Which we need to know that, and different looks as well.
Yeah,
And-
he can come as an angel of light.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or as the anointed cherubim,
Mm-hmm.
or as a dragon and a serpent.
That's why the Bible tells us to
Yeah, or
test
as a
the spirits.
Yeah, or as a morning star. That's
Mhm.
the bright aspect. and different names for each. So we need to be aware of that. And Hallel would be the bright shining star name, which is in Isaiah 14, where you have a Italian word substituted for a Hebrew word into English. So it should be Hallel ben Shakar, as the Hebrew is. It should be Hallel, son of the morning, not Lucifer, which is the god of the Gnostics and the secret societies.
There you
It just ought not to be there. Not all translations have Lucifer in there, but that should not be translated accordingly.
Yeah.
And so you have two other places where these disembodied spirits can go. One is roaming the earth as in dry places, and they need an Oiketarian or a soul and a body to possess to interact physically in this world, and a place of rest, because they have no place of rest. Or the other place that they're going to go, and this is so interesting in why Isaiah 14 and other passages, but particularly Ezekiel 32 on the terrible ones, these are the terrible ones that are in the prisons and the sides of the pit prison there for doing terrible things to humankind and were slain. There's also the fallen angels there that's in there in Ezekiel 32 in the KG translation, where it says the mighty are also talking to, guess what, another Rephaim giant, Pharaoh of the Beast Empire bloodlines. And that is the Hebrew word El, small case, for an angel or a god.
Yep.
And they're also speaking to Pharaoh from there in this really unique dual, what I would call a dual prophecy. So yeah, it's this understanding of prehistory helps us to understand that when people say that they're talking to their ancestors in seances or hypnotism or past lives, or they're dealing with spirit guides, these are not humans.
Yeah,
None of them.
you shouldn't trust anything they say, because they are master deceivers, and they've been around for thousands of years, and they know a lot more than you do.
Yeah, they're liars.
Yes, their job is to steal, kill, and destroy. And they're
So
the
then
father of lies. Yeah.
But then people say, as in the book of Psalms, in the book of Hebrews, that angels are spirits, so they can't have sex with humans.
Yeah, I've heard that one before too. Yeah.
Just as Matthew, the book of Matthew talks about that there's no sex in heaven, but they never like to really utilize Luke's account, which is a much more expanded version on it, that basically says that we're going to be like angels when we go to heaven. That's after the resurrection, where there's no need for sex in heaven.
And everything, and you're made like Jesus when you see him. And
yeah. So, but still they stick on to it and they say, but if you can't do it in heaven, you can't do it on earth. Well, of course, that's why it's a violation against the laws of creation. But here's how they do it. And here's how we know they can do it. So if we look at the book of Genesis, you have in Genesis 18 and 19 a very revealing passage about angels. And we have angels descriptions in their various forms throughout the Bible. But you have Jehovah of the Elohim making a physical body for himself, so that he can interact physically with Abraham. Because he touches, he eats, he speaks, he
has him in the tent, says, hey.
Yeah, exactly. And the angels that accompany him, Abraham doesn't at first recognize them as angels. So they can be in human form and you would not know them. And then these two angels go on to Sodom, but yet the people in Sodom knew they were angels, even though they were described as men, so they can make themselves known. And then for people who say, well, you don't have a New Testament version on it. Well, of course I do. Hebrews, yeah. Hebrews 13 is probably the best accounting for it, where it says to be nice to strangers, lest you come across an angel unaware.
Unawares. I've had that happen before, I believe.
Oh, I'm sure we all have.
Yes.
I just hope I reacted properly.
Yeah, same here.
So you should, that's why we get that kind of warning. So if they can make an Oiketarian for themselves, a soul and a body, then they would have DNA in that Oiketarian, and that would be passed on, which is how they do it. And for that term oiketerion. That comes from Jude 1:6 in the word habitation, that the angels left, where it's
Left their
talking about
first
the angelic,
estate.
to do the crimes that they did. And then that word means a dwelling place for a spirit. They left a dwelling place for their spirit in heaven, and they can be as a spirit being in this world, but not interact physically unless they have that oiketerion,
Yeah,
which is
unless
the
they
soul
take
and
it
the body.
on. Yeah.
So just as we have our spirit merge with the soul, and only God and Jesus can separate the spirit from the soul.
And people have a real spiritual encounters and experiences all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the oiketerion. We get oiketerion used one other time in the New Testament, which again is quite revealing as understanding this dwelling place or a home, right? A home for where the spirit is going to be. And that's in 2 Corinthians 5:2, where it says house in heaven. That's oiketerion, and it's the house in heaven that we are desiring and craving
we long for, our souls crying out for.
Yeah. Now, variations of the oiketerion word are used throughout, but only specifically as the dwelling place. It's only used twice in the Greek in the New Testament. So that's how it's done, and that's why there is a oiketerion created for Jesus through Mary by the Holy Spirit, that as the spirit being becomes flesh as the word, and that it has nothing to do with sex of any sort, but it allows him to do his commission and to be fully affected by the whole world, and to be crucified without sin for the world. So and it also
make a way for us back to the Father in heaven and what we were originally created for.
And also answers why Melchizedek was blessed, or Melchizedek blessed Abraham, who's going to be the father of Israel, to create the tribe of Judah, who's going to produce David, and that lineage is going to produce Mary.
Yeah. Wow.
And and because that, again, according to the book of Hebrews, Melchizedek has no genealogy, no beginning or end.
And we are
an Omega.
And he made us kings and priests according to the order of Melchizedek.
Yeah.
Phil, I usually drop in and watch it, but I'm actually streaming.
Yeah.
And that's why he inherits us as the immortal, as being replaced. And I think part of the resolution to the fall of Satan, who was probably high priest as well.
Yeah, he was in charge of the praise. Yeah. And so it's interesting there. I don't know if I told you or not, but I do deliverance too. I'm a deliverance minister, and so disembodied spirits, just says it in the name. What are they looking for? A body. They're looking for a body to inhabit and get their lust, their personalities through, all while defiling God's image that they hate.
Yeah. And in the Old Testament, we get a couple of passages that aren't recognized as talking about these types of spirits. And so in Psalms 106 and Deuteronomy 32, it's talking about devils that are sacrificed to. So just as devils are talked about in the New Testament, where it goes back to daemon, not diablos, and this doesn't go back to a word that we have for devil in the Old Testament, because we don't get another specific word that is directly linked as a root word for devil. But what we do get is the Hebrew word shade, or shed, or shedeh, depending on how you want to pronounce that, which means a demon spirit.
Surprise!
Surprise, surprise, surprise. And with the post-Diluvian giants, you have the Rephaim.
Right, yeah, the Rephaim. That means the people of the dead, right, in Hebrew tongue?
Well, it has a few different meanings, but the Rephaim are post-Diluvian giants, and here's how it connects to the dead. So you have 7495 in the Greek, not in the Greek, in the Hebrew lexicon for the Old Testament, and that's Rapha, Rapha, and it means healer. And so you put that into a name, like say, as an angel in the Apocrypha, Raphael. It means,
yeah, that's what I thought of.
means God heals or healer of God. But also understand Baal is in the occult, has names, and is thought to be equivalent to the loyal Raphael. And so he has names that have just different spellings as a counterfeit. But again, all angels have multiple names. Baal is being Lord God, Lord Master, Master of God, all sorts of different names. As the Al is the transliterated El, or an angel or a god. And so Rapha 7495 is the source word for 7497, which is the tribe of giants. And how do we know they're a tribe of giants? A, it's defined as that out of Hebrew. B, they show up as a tribe in Genesis 14 in the War of Giants.
Yeah.
And then they show up as a tribe in Genesis 15 in the land that's being promised to Abraham.
Yeah.
From the Nile to the Euphrates, and there's other giants in there and hybrid giants that are also listed in the Mighty Seven and the Mighty 10, as I like to group the additional triple K in there. So people look up Genesis 15, you'll see three tribes, K, K, and K. I won't tell you who they are off the top, but just to give you a little project to do. But what's also interesting is Rapha is used in a totality for giants 25 times. Where it says giant, it goes back to the Hebrew 7497 Rapha. Yeah. And so Nephilim is only used 3 times.
Right.
And the difference is that the Rephaim are the post-Diluvian giants.
Right.
And the Nephilim, even as they're described in Numbers 13:33 in the Belly's part of the report, aren't really Nephilim because they're describing the Anakim kings, Sheshai, Talmai, and Ahiman. And the Anakim are described in Deuteronomy 2 as giants, but not as Nephilim, as Rephaim. The Bible is not in contradiction. What's going on here is the Israelites are testifying to the veracity of the larger and more powerful giants before the flood. And they're trying to terrify the rest of Israel, and they are successful in doing so, not to go into the covenant land to take on these monsters. Right. And so they embellish it. Not that they weren't giants. They were clearly giants, as other passages describe them, but they weren't the Nephilim. They were a little bit smaller and less powerful. And that doesn't mean that, and so 7496 is the disembodied spirit word that was also sourced in 7495. And it can mean a demon spirit, an evil spirit, and it can also
spirit, wicked spirit.
And also translated as death, as it comes into English, as in the book of Job, where you have death and Rapha, and there's a couple other passages, and I'll note that in book 2 as well for people. So it's associated with death, as in disembodied spirits, and their spirits aren't sleeping.
Right.
Right? And they're all interconnected to give you the larger meaning. Now we get all of that put together in the Bible, but it's not really sort of connected. But if we go outside the Bible and we go to the Ugaritic text, which is written in the original Semitic languages, which was originally vowelless, as Hebrew was originally vowelless, and it is the source language for Hebrew, we can make a lot of direct connections. And so the Baalim and Baal and Anat are in there as creating their RPM, as it's in the original Semitic, and it's transliterated into English in various translations as Rapiu or Rapium. And it's akin to when you see the Nephilim pronounced Nephilim with a P and without the H. It's that same sort of evolution of the language. So just as the Hebrew language evolved to putting in the vowels, it also evolved in that case with the P adding an H in some cases. And so some people are really technical on the language. You'll say, I don't care what Strong says, do not pronounce it Nephilim. It's still the old Nephilim. But
what's sickening, Diane, is the billions of dollars that the United States has given Ukraine, while there's it looks like hundreds of thousands of people. I don't mean the illegal immigrants, I mean the American homeless. There's so many American homeless, and they send billions of dollars to the Ukraine. It's actually heresy.
Strong says it's pronounced as an F. And then you get, even out of Hebrew, you get F as being used instead of a PH. So in some of their things, so it's, don't get confused by that. It's the same sort of understanding. So they created after the flood
Yeah,
the
wow.
Raphaim. And their holy cities are Edrei and Ashtaroth. And if that sounds familiar, that's in the Bashan region of Mount Hermon, where King Og, the last of the giants, Raphaim in the male plural, ruled from. And there's even more connections there. So they created these giants, and they're doing fertility rituals to create more Raphaim because they have a reproduction issue. It's not for necessarily fertility, it's producing less women. And it's going to require them to intermarry amongst humans otherwise they're going to go extinct. Yeah. So they're described as giants and mighty ones, and GBR Gabor is in there as well, also as a tribe of giants, although biblically you have to be careful not to assign mighty one to describing giants, because not all of David's men would have been qualified to be giants because they're Israelites. Right. So yes, you might have a hybrid like Uriah the Hittite or a Makathim, as identified in Book 2 as a giant tribe, and no patriarch listed in the Table of Nations. You qualify them as hybrid or Raphaim. So you want to be careful with that. But there is a tribe that's called the Gibborim in the Ugaritic text, and it's also used as mighty one as well.
Yeah, mighty man of valor back in Genesis 6.
Yeah. Now these Rephaim kings and their assembly of the Tanu, the assembly of giants at Mount Hermon, where the assembly of the Baalim are, that is talked about biblically, these are described as giants, as we just talked about, and as dynastic kings, just as the royals are, kings of God, as you take that back on its etymology. Just as Aels, that transliteration of El. In Book 1, I call them Rex Deus, which is the Latin term for the same meaning. And you have them as giants, you have them as dynastic kings, and you have...
I was never here. Come over and help me take over Australia, and we'll make this a Christian refuge. I wish we could do that.
Have them as healers.
Oh.
And the word healer is not used just to heal others, but to heal themselves. So they had this ability, whether it's technology or part of the DNA, they were very hard to kill. That's why you have to behead a giant.
Does that sound familiar in all the depictings of Hollywood and all that stuff with your Wolverines and stuff?
Yeah. So now what's interesting about the Raphaim that are described as the exact descriptions and same types of kings, just as the Ugaritic text actually goes back to the word Arit, which is the Hebrew word for the terrible ones that I talked about in Ezekiel 32,
right?
And Og. That was probably the original city of King Og, who likely moves over to Mount Hermon after the War of Giants, after most of the Rephaim are wiped out, and rolls over Amorites after that war. And one of the reasons why he's called the last of the Rephaim. Right? So everything starts to fit sort of biblically, and rules from the cities of Baal and Anath.
Cities. You know that book I take down there?
Yeah. Well, he had 12 Pentapoli, 60 cities over his kingdom that the Israelites had to take on. And so we also get a description of Baal as a bull and the Baalim as bulls, just as Molech would be depicted as a bull. But their offspring were also called bulls. And so when we look at the term Nephilim, people will say, well, some of the terms are bull and tyrant. Well, of course, that's part of the full meaning. They were called bullies. That's where the word bully comes from. Yeah. And tyrant goes back to the Gyges and the Gyges kings that were bloodline after the flood and similar before the flood, but after the flood accountings has that Herculides bloodline or Zeus's bloodline of giants in Greek mythology that produced dynastic kings around Greece and in the Middle East as well. And so they were called in the Assyrian area.
Achilles, Hercules, Odysseus, Paris, Hector. They're all giants, guys. They're all sons of the fallen angels. They're all sons of Zeus and all that.
The Middle East, and in the Anatolian or the Hittite area as tyrannos, as these dynastic giant kings that come from Zeus, and
Great
also
song,
be a human
Shawnee.
female after the flood to produce Hercules in this dynastic level of kings. And so Tarwanos with a T-A-R
Speak of the devil.
spelling would be the Anatolian version of the same thing for the Indo-Aryan kings, which were giants that I explained in detail, and I make a lot of connections to
Yes.
in book one.
So hold that thought. If you guys are listening to the encyclopedia and wealth of information that Gary has invested into these books, I encourage you get one. Challenge yourself, challenge your thinking, and dive into it for yourself. Like you said, he has the research to back it up. He's not just talking out of some Lululand or something that he's fascinated with. God put him on this mission, I feel, and he's revealed a lot of stuff. And I look forward to getting book 2 for my library as well.
Now, the word for the lords of the Philistines, as the Seranim, as you take that back to Hebrew, has an etymology back to these tyrannos. And so the Philistines weren't giants, they were hybrid giants, but they intermarried with giants and many giant nations that came with them when they expropriated Gaza in about, say, 1550 BC, and were one of the more powerful nations with their pentapolis and military complex that they set up. So that word goes back to the Philistines. It's an insertion into Hebrew with an etymology that goes back to Greek, to tyrannos, through the Philistines, through Crete, and to the Indo-Aryans as the word, Sar or Saran, also meaning prince, that it interweaves in there. And so these were tyrants and bloodline kings of the giants again that show up in the Philistines. And so I make a little connection there in book 2, and I use other sources, or book 1 and then use other sources. In book 2, I show you the whole etymology, taking it back. So
the Hittites and the Jebusites and all the ites, right?
Yeah. So don't let people tell you that the word Nephilim, all the terms don't refer to giants. All the words that are listed there describe the giants. That's where they're sourced from. And so then people say, well, it doesn't really mean giant. But you just have to stand in there and you have to sort of answer some of those questions. So of course they were giants. And that word, some people will say, well, giant doesn't mean giant, it means earthborn. Well, how do you get there? Well, through gigantic. Well, that's half the story. Gigantic is rooted in Gygus, singular, with the E epsilon, the E epsilon letter changes the G to a Y, or dies or diges. And in the plural, giantes or gigantes, as the word comes from Greek. So it sources through giantes, as we get the pronunciation of giant, is plural, and from Gygus and Gyes as its source word. So again, it means giant, and they're also earthborn because they come from human females.
Hence
in
the
physical
mingling
world.
of the DNA. Yeah.
The full meaning of the word again. And again, watch out for people, whether it's eschatology or anything that they do, doctrine or prehistory, if they have to ignore certain aspects, that's a red flag.
Yes.
They like to leave out inconvenient passages or inconvenient
or just
information.
glossed over them, like, oh, that's what happened there, and moving on.
Yeah, so
Wait,
and then people
what?
say, okay, so the word's fine, but they still weren't like these large people. They were like 7 feet tall. Well, not quite true. So biblically, we get Goliath, who is a son of the giants,
Right.
Rapha.
Yeah, right.
And some people say that was the father's name, but it's also a tribe of giants, and it could be a generic name for giants as it's used. You have to watch the application. And don't just pick your because Hebrew words and Greek words have a lot of different meanings. Don't pick, if you're going to take it back to Hebrew and Greek, which I encourage, don't be selective with biases. Pick the right meaning that doesn't conflict with the sentence it's in, the verse it's in, the narrative it's in, or any other passage in the Bible. Yes, it's a tough standard, but that's what you have to do.
And it's so much easier nowadays. We have it so much easier than having to have big lexicons and concordances and taking your time looking up. You got it right at your fingertips.
Yeah. And so Goliath is 6 cubits and a span. Well, and I make the case in book 1 and in book 2, I really nail it down that he would be a king and measured on a 21-inch cubit versus a standard 18-inch cubit. And Josephus says to measure the giants on a royal 21-inch cubit as well, because they were all the royals, all the nobility class. And so 6 cubits and a span would make him 11 feet 3 inches. And even if you use the shorter one, he'd be 9 feet 9 inches.
Right.
And he was described as stout. That's
Shawnee, it's sort of tough, isn't it? Like God, Jesus did say to Peter, put down your sword. But I'm pretty sure if there's a battle at Armageddon, we represent Christ's side of the battle. So warriors must be approved in some way. And I'm telling you, I'm not the type that will turn the other cheek to a smart ass. I'll pull them up on it.
one of the significant words that are used that I really flesh out in book 2 is that word stout. It means muscularly wide, not flabby and fat. So it's
like a huge Doug fir, hundreds of years old.
Yeah. So Og's bed was left on display for future generations in Rabbah, for that the future generations would know the size of the people that they bought, and it was an iron bed.
Yeah.
Because wood would not hold his weight, and it was 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide. He was the king of Edrei and Ashtaroth. So clearly,
I knew it, Di. There must have been permission for us to defend ourselves. I knew it. Thank you for posting that. I skimmed through it. I didn't read the whole lot, but I got to the basics.
He's a king, just as I think Goliath was the king of Gath and was replaced by, another king after Ashish, as I recall his name was, after Goliath was killed. And so that bed would have been close to 16 feet long on a royal cubit and 7 feet wide. So, and that is a 2-to-1 height to width ratio that they also wanted to have people remember, because the giants were extremely wide and muscular. The average height to width ratio of a human is 3-to-1, not 2-to-1. So more than twice the size, approaching 3 times the size from the biblical account. So for him to fit in his bed, minimum 12 feet, he's going to be minimum 12 feet. He could be 11 feet, but now it's a really oversized bed, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But more likely, he's going to be 13, 14 feet tall, maybe 14 and a half, maybe 15 feet tall to fit in. And he's going to be 4, 5, or 6 feet wide.
Thousands of pounds.
Yes, thousands of pounds.
Iron to hold you up.
Yeah.
Imagine seeing someone 6 foot wide. They'd have to be 18 foot tall. And David took on someone like that. That's really hectic.
Now, we get giants, let's say, like Orontes or Achilles, which would be about 12 feet tall in post-Diluvian giants, and their second incursion of giants created after the flood as well. In the Ugaritic text, and in the Epic of Gilgamesh and other languages recording Gilgamesh, they record him as 11 cubits tall and 4 cubits wide. So he'd be 19 feet tall as king of Uruk, 6th generation after the flood, and almost 7 feet wide, but would be 7 feet wide on a royal cubit.
Well, yeah, and what about all the bones that they've been finding? And I mean, way taller than that, even. There's some that are taller than that.
Yeah, which I think the antediluvian giants or the post-diluvian giants were larger because there were some sort of restrictions that were put on after Genesis 6:3, and God knew that their giants would show up after the flood. He knew everything that was going to happen. So whether they survived, or I think what fits better biblically as a second creation, particularly with accounts all around the world that there was a second creation. Then we have the Ugaritic text that lines up perfectly and why the Bible distinguishes Rephaim from Nephilim. Lots
and
of
so-
sort of
Can I ask you a question about that
Yeah.
now, being in common day and with all of the DNA manipulation and all of the things they've been working on for a very long time? I
Yeah.
think they've perfected it to make them look more like us now in a physical frame.
They may as well call it the Satanic Bible. Hey, I was never here.
Well, I think
Do you have
that's
any-
part of it. I think that's part of it. But also remember that there was this inability to reproduce, which is why they want to bring Baal and Anat back to create more Rephaim. And of course, the other question is where are they trying to bring him back from? Of course, he's killed in the Ugaritic text, but you can't kill something immortal.
Right.
So they did the same crimes as his father El did and Ashtaroth did. They created Nephilim before the flood. Baalim and Anat created Rephaim after the flood, sometime before Babel. And those are the people that, in the Babel dispersion, the humans moved and lived amongst. And of course, the Canaanites moved in and with the Rephaim in the covenant land. And so they're gone and they're in the pit prison. So it's important to understand that these giants were not only just created again after the flood in like manner as was done as Genesis 6:4 talks about, but it makes more perfect sense as to why we're being familiarized with the Baalim gods in the Bible versus some of the other ones, because those are the ones that are appropriate to the commonality of the story. And that this fertility issue is also rooted in the word for terrible one, Arit, where it gives all these descriptions like stout for these giants and stuff like that, but also childless and some sort of fertility issue.
Yeah.
And so they're not to go extinct, they have to intermarry with humans. And that's where hybrids come from.
That's where you get the specific bloodline families.
Yeah. So when you have like Timnah marrying Amalek, that I cover a lot in book 1, and it really is something that if you want to focus a little more on for the hybrids in book 2, it's one of those cases to look like. And I'll identify in book 1 very curious tribes that don't go back to the Table of Nations.
Yeah.
Right? And so Timnah is the doc.
I was never here. You said, what if you didn't stop someone who's going to hurt more children? I agree. Isn't there somewhere in the Bible that said cowards don't get into heaven? Isn't that in the Bible somewhere? I'm not 100% sure, but I think it says cowards don't get into heaven. Because how could cowards get into heaven? You just couldn't get there as a coward.
Daughter of Seir, a Horim giant, as Deuteronomy 2 describes them, and Timnah marries Eliphaz, son of Esau, brother of Jacob.
Wow.
And they produce Amalek.
There you go.
And he is named eponymously after the Amalekim that show up in Genesis 14. Remember, this is Genesis 36 and 100 years later,
Right.
a few hundred years later. And that they go and they live amongst the Amalekim in Petra. And that's one of the reasons why they're married there. But that's a hybrid tribe.
Yeah.
That are part of the taller people that the evil report in Genesis 13:33 is talking about. The Amalekites are included. And then repeated again with those people that are taller, and the Amorites, it's the same story 40 years later in Deuteronomy 1. So we have a full accounting of the accuracy of what's accurate in the report. Because the Bible doesn't leave these things to chance.
Yeah,
People
that's
like
so
to
crazy.
ignore the inconvenient passages is all. So who else is listed in some of those hybrids that are taller but are different than the Anakim, as in the kings that are listed, Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai? Well, you have the Canaanites.
Wow.
And you have the Hittites. And you
Yeah.
have the Amorites. And
All the
of these
heights.
heights. And
Yeah.
if you look in the Table of Nations under Canaan, he has 2 sons, Heth and
Yeah.
Sidon. So we know Canaan is the offspring of Ham, and Heth and Sidon are obviously the sons of Canaan. But we don't get a patriarch for the Amorites. We don't get a patriarch for the Jebusites. 9 of them we don't get patriarchs for. Well, that's a rather mystery. They're the only ones in the table of nations in Genesis 10. And accepting that Genesis 36 is done, I think, to help us understand as an addition to the table of nations, but not to be confused with the 70 sons of Noah, right? Or the 70 descendants or patriarchs of Noah.
Yeah.
And so you get these 9 patriarchless tribes that are unaccounted for. Well, who else is a patriarch that we get biblically that may not be in the Bible? Well, there's a fellow named Arba, who is the patriarch of the Anakim.
I got to do a series on the patriarch. I've done a little bit on him, but not much.
In the book of Joshua, who's not listed in the table of nations. Why? He's a Rephaim. Who else might we have? Well, as you dig into the Rapha name, it can be understood as, in terms of the giant, as a specific generic name for giants in general.
Hey, Lars, good to see you, mate.
It can be a name of a giant. It can be the patriarch of the giants. And it can be understood depending on the context. But as the patriarch, that means he started the tribe of giants, right? And that tribe, as they're listed in Genesis 15 and 14, are the eponymous name of the tribe, taken after the patriarch. And patriarchically, Rapha would come from one of the other names of Baal that we talked about, a variation of Raphael. Or Raphael, would probably with the single P would be more accurately in that spelling. But
yeah, and that's funny because that's all Satan has and his minions. It's like they have just cheap tricks, what I call cheap tricks and counterfeits, because they can't create. So it's all, that's so cool that you brought that up about Rapha and Raphael. And,
so and most of this information I'm talking about is all in the Bible, but you can, where you find stuff outside of the Bible and it lines up perfectly, probably
tell you
makes sense.
something.
That not all of the biases of influence, that there is some fact within their bias biases. So now, if you want to look at then how this affects sort of downstream with all of this intermarriage, is they have to continue to intermarry, because if they keep that too tight within 4 separations, they get blood disease. And like hemophiliac disease, or more appropriate to the Royale would be the Habsburg jaw disease, right? So they have to keep bringing in further outside bloodlines to prevent these specific.
I knew it, Diane. I knew there'd be stuff anti-cowardice in the Bible. It had to be. It's an anti-virtue, like that site said.
Diseases from entering in.
And so very, very, very selective.
So over time, you get this dilution of the original DNA, the genes that they would call as the gene of Isis, from the matriarchal bloodline that continues and passes on the bloodline from that. I don't put it in the book, but I think it's Rh negative bloodline that's associated with that. And it's the gene that is the introduction into humans that provides for the missing blood type that has a missing antigen. Otherwise, you just can't have a bloodline being added if you just keep it to blood when it's missing something. You can't add what's not there.
Right.
So
but then that can go into the quest of them looking for all of these mighty men's bodies and the DNA research.
Absolutely, it does.
All the crazy stuff, like the real reason why we went to Iraq here in America and the government.
And I've got a document I can send you where you have the links to the email that Clinton was looking for after she was Secretary of State for the tomb of Gilgamesh that they discovered there. and for DNA and for likely the sarcophagus and possibly the technology. So I have that if people want it. It's not just, and it goes
Yeah,
right to the
email it to
government
me.
archives. Yeah, it goes right to the archives of the government. So
Yeah, it's not conspiracy.
Yeah, I like to
Well,
verify
there's a
things.
conspiracy
I'm a
there, but there ain't
contrarian.
no theory there.
Yeah.
It's a conspiracy, right? Because conspiracy
Yeah.
just means one or more people plotting something. It's like,
Yeah, and biblically we understand conspiracy in Hebrew as an unlawful alliance and manifested in a confederacy and a conspiracy to commit treason.
something not good.
Yeah, so a group of people doing it. So and we're
Yeah.
warned about these conspirators in the Bible. So of course the spurious ones are going to
Bingo.
say, it's a conspiracy theory and make it as a bad thing. Well, no, it's what they're doing. They're projecting.
Bingo, Diane. We can also protect our house. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it wouldn't be letting us down with just rolling over.
On
Programming you how to think it and how to view it.
Yeah. So now, if you want to look at that dilution, I would encourage people to look at Akhenaten of the Pharaoh dynasty, and that's part of the King Tut museums that go around. You can Google Akhenaten, and that's 1,000 years after the flood. Now, with the Akhenaten bloodline, it's a very, very important and noble bloodline. 1,000 years after the flood in the Royal bloodline. That's why it's so famous and front and center. I mean,
Akhenaten.
Yeah.
Wow.
He changed his name.
That's the one they reckon Obama looks like. Akhenaten.
Amenhotep was his
And he
name before he
does.
converted to worshiping Aten as the main god. So they just, again, different titles and names for the kings.
Yeah.
So where I'm going with this is that understand that word sons of God and watcher. And I'll connect this back to the dilution of the bloodlines. And so people say, wow, you're going back to the book of Enoch. Okay, well, let's go biblically first. We have sons of God, and they're sons of God. They're angels in the book of Enoch. And we've talked about them as being angels in the Bible. And we also have the word watcher in the Bible in Daniel 4 times.
Yep.
And it's the Hebrew word Ayer. And it's the second part of the word Sair, which produces the transliterated satyr for the devil's goat gods.
Wow.
These are degraded watchers as you pull that together. Again, stuff I talk about in book 2. The book 2 is written for Christians.
Right.
Specifically everything that's in the Bible that they need to know about prehistory and start to put that into end time prophecy.
Yeah, put the pieces together.
Yeah, so in Daniel 4, the watchers come from the throne of God, and they're dealing with religion and governance. And there's a order of angels that look after this. One, and we get a description of them as governing the laws in Daniel 4 and in Isaiah 6 as being the ministers of God working in the fiery stones before God at the altar, in the altar. And these are seraphim angels. And seraphim, seraph is the plural, seraphim is the I am ones plural, as in Nephilim or Rephaim is giant ones. And these are serpent-faced, six-winged dragons or serpents and angels. And so if they took that form, that physical form, those traits would be passed on. And that's why you have, with the gods that are represented around the world,
I was just going to say,
serpentine imagery.
with feathers, the snakes with wings and
the plumed serpent,
yes,
and the Nagas, the dragon creator gods, Osiris, Zeus, Anki, and most of the gods running the earth are seraphim, right? They're fallen seraphim, and they're watchers. There's 4 groups of watchers: Ophanim, cherubim, and seraphim, and archangels. And in book 2, I rearranged the standard Dionysius is hierarchy, because archangels come from the presence of God, so they have to be part of the top order.
Yeah.
It sort of makes sense. So
just how it lines up.
Yeah. So I don't like.
But I believe they got a chronovision. I'm not so sure if they got time travel like Stargate and that and the Flash make out? Because that seems pretty preposterous. But I do believe they have that what are they, chronovision thing? I do believe that. And how they done it, apparently this is how they done it. They went back to the audio over the whole world. This is their theory. I'm not saying it's true, but apparently they went through the audio ever said in the whole world, and they trace it back to Nicodemus. And from Nicodemus, they could zero in on the rest of it. And there's actually a photo on the chronovision of Nicodemus with Jesus. I'm not saying that's legit, but I'm saying that's the science out there.
Yeah, things that are inconsistent. So I like to dig deep into them. So, anyways,
Yeah.
the kings.
100% they're doing cloning. I believe Donald Marshall's cloning centers. I believe Donald Marshall.
Before the flood and after the flood, and as depicted on reliefs, as depicted on statues, and as described in their writings, were called serpents.
Yeah.
They look just like their
And Vast, the Montauk chair, that's time travel, literal time travel. So I think they've got it. It's just hard to wrap your head around.
creators, because that DNA was passed on.
Right.
And long necked. And so
yeah, long necked and yep.
And wouldn't be a long skinny neck. It would be a wide neck, along with that understanding of the stoutness. So if you look at a pharaoh headpiece, it has this cobra wide neck look to it. That's representing.
And then what does it have up here? Oh, it's a little snake most of the time.
Yeah, a snake. Yeah, there's snake imagery all around it, and both Anakim and Og have a meaning that goes back to long neck, so a long, thick neck that they would have had. And that's depicted in these headdresses that would cover this elongated monster skull. And some pictures you get of the pharaohs with these elongated skulls without it, but typically they got a hat
or
or some sort to cover it.
Yeah.
And what you can't do with binding a skull is create larger volume. You just have the same volume, but it's skinnier. And you can't make the sutures disappear, right? So these are distinct. And so if you look at now Akhenaten on a picture, if somebody Googles it, you're going to see this serpentine face with this elongated skull. And so you have this long protruding chin, these very high cheekbones. And notice that models, they want to have...
Hit the nail on the head, boss. That's exactly what they're doing.
Very high cheekbones. And certain things about the eyes, that's because they want them to be fair, because that's what was thought as beauty within the royals, fair, pale white skins that the giants have. And blonde hair and red hair was also prized. That's where the color hair is of most of the giants. There is a dark-haired variety as well that includes Gilgamesh, but that's a rabbit hole I don't want to go down at this point in time. There's always more doors to open. And so
I'm curious.
Then you have these large wraparound eyes, and those eyes would have shone because they're called the shining ones. It would light up a room. And they had these deep voices. So if you Google Akhenaten, you're going to see a diluted serpentine face that is over 1,000 years old after the flood and after the second creation of the giants. And understand that that's part of the serpentine nature and part of that serpent seed that's talked about as a curse and a prophecy in Genesis 3:15 that gets produced with the giants in Genesis 6. That's the evil seed line that we're going to be fighting as the visible ones as well as the invisible ones, and that we also...
Vast, if you look at the craters on the moon, they don't look like craters. They look like pancake bubbles. You know, when you fry pancakes and they get them little bubbles in them that burst? That's what it looks like. It doesn't look like it's been... Oh, some of it does.
Fight flesh and blood, that's the spurious ones again, as well as those dark angels those angels in high places that we're fighting, the fallen ones in the council of the gods and things. And so we need to understand that there's a seed line here that we're dealing against that is trying to wipe us from the face of the earth. And I make the case that part of the technology that was provided by the angels that merged with the seven sciences took the antediluvian world to a level of technology that we're just catching up to today.
Yeah, exactly.
And that means with the violence that they had, when you apply that to the violence, then they were on the precipice of completely destroying humankind from the face of the earth. Thus comes the flood.
Yeah, thus comes a flood, and it talks about Noah being perfect in his generations.
Yes.
Where do we get that word from?
Yeah.
That wasn't talking about his integrity or his stature with
It's
God.
genealogy.
Yes, it's genealogy, because right after that it talks about a devout man or a righteous man of God.
Yeah, so perfect in spirit, perfect in body.
Original creation, yeah.
Yeah, so we need to understand it. And also we see technology reflected in the word the earth was corrupted. So that's the Hebrew word shakah. And it's just the earth, not sea, where everything's been corrupted. So that means if everything is corrupted, the DNA is corrupted.
Yep.
And the plant genomes. And if that's the case, then it answers the question. And that word means to decay, pervert, ruin, destroy in Hebrew. Something corrupted everything. It's the angelic technology and the things that are going on. And so it needed to be replaced. And that answers the question why God calls every kind or a representative of the species to the ark, because they're not DNA manipulated.
Right.
The ones he calls.
Yeah, he knows.
Yeah, everything just starts to fall into place when you have a fuller understanding of things. And so it's this technology that is another key thing that we need to sort of understand that is associated with before the flood and what's going to happen in the days of Noah. The like the days of Noah in that larger context that includes the violence. Who caused the violence? It's the giants.
Yeah.
And who ruined the earth? The giants did. They are the ones that get the blood on their hands. So the fallen angels don't have to do it. Yeah.
All of that stuff, it comes from them. Imagine those sizes that Gary was talking about.
Yeah.
How much do you need to sustain that body to fill it? And they literally ate out cities and then started eating the people because there was nothing else left to eat. I mean, Yeah.
Yeah. And if you line up the days of Noah with learning everything about the days of Noah, when you assume that, you assume the violence, but did you assume giants and violence together?
Okay, that's what it's called. Is it geocentric? Doesn't spin. Yeah, it's the only planet or moon in a whole galaxy, in the whole universe that you never see it spin, and you don't get to see the dark side. There's been photos of the dark side, and they got a lot. It looks like they got little like igloo cities there, like all these little igloo type buildings.
Because it's going to be like the days of Noah. Did you imagine the DNA manipulation and the plant genome manipulation? Well, wait a minute. We're doing all that technology today,
and the animals, and everything on the land, like you said.
And it's going to be like the days of Noah, and those are the exact same words translated, written down into.
And all the floods around the world, as in the days of Noah, not many of them are picking that up.
Greek into English as what went from Hebrew into English in Genesis 9:29, the days of Noah. And his days were, as a generation, 600 years before the flood, 350 years after the flood. There were gods ruling before the flood, that Deuteronomy 32 talks about, over the 70 nations, and ruling after the flood. There were giants before the flood, there were giants after the flood. You had this universal Enochian mysticism after the flood. You get that reintroduced at Babel, which is the Babylon religion that's coming again, and is the Babylon religion, or the daughter of Babylon, as the Bible describes about it, with the beast empires that's coming again.
Oh, it's here.
Yeah. So we need to understand that generation. And I'm not saying that generation is 600 years or 650 years. Biblically, we get 40 years in the time of the wilderness.
Yeah, either 40 or 70.
70 in the book of Psalms. But because of the Noah reference, life was limited to 120 years in Genesis 6:3. It may be that one. So we have to be open that if indeed we're in the fig tree generation, and in the days or generation of Noah, and I take that back to generation as well in the language in book 2, then we
what
have to.
Yeshua said about this generation shall by no means pass.
Yes.
Heaven and earth will fall away.
Will fall away, but his words will not. Absolutely. And so we want to be careful with end time chronology. What starts it, and then not go beyond the possibilities that whatever date that you're using, you need to factor those 3 in. And Christians, we cannot lose our credibility on prophecy. Just when the world is going to need us the most, if indeed we're in the fig tree generation, and I think we are, then we better have it right. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that
the first thing
I think
Jesus
get ahead
says,
of themselves.
the first thing Jesus says about the end times to all of us, take heed that nobody deceives you. Well, the first thing that tells me is there's going to be a lot of people trying to deceive me.
Yeah.
And he talks about many false prophets.
Yeah. And even the elect will
even the elect will be this. Yeah.
Yes. And the other thing is in terms of his coming back, he doesn't even know the exact hour.
No. Only the Father.
Only the Father. El Elyon.
Yeah, and so he charges us to know the seasons, but like you said, the exact day and hour, no one knows.
Yes.
But we're called to know the season.
Yeah. So when people are saying, we know when the rapture is going to happen by the day or whatever, yes.
Yeah, or whether he's going to come take us up before it all happens, or mid or post and all that. I look.
So I'm pretty sure I'm right. The moon doesn't rotate. And here's something else. When it gets struck by a meteor, it echoes like a bell for hours. Apparently that's true as well. So inside the moon sounds like it might be hollow.
Get it very logically a long time ago.
Looks like a Star Wars Death Star if you think about it.
It was like, well, I'm gonna prepare for the worst and hope for the best and do all I can in his will now.
Yep.
Because if I'm prepared for the worst and he comes before that, I'm not gonna be upset.
You have no worries.
I'm not gonna be like, why did you come back now?
But you do have to recognize the season so that you're prepared to look up.
Yes, yeah,
because your redemption draws nigh.
But I never could see how a great falling away would happen. This was probably like 20 years ago, and I was just studying it out for myself, and I was like, oh, that's how I could see a great falling away. If I'm expecting Jesus to come right before the worst time the world's ever seen, and he doesn't come, where does that leave my faith?
Yes, it'll shatter
that time.
It will shatter a lot, and that's why in book 1 I have a chapter I call the Rapture Tragedy.
Yeah.
If they have the timing wrong, how many people will lose their faith because of that? So again, we want to make sure we get it right and how we talk about it. And yes, that's exactly what I tell people is I believe it's mid-trib, a little bit after, but what I do is I hope for pre-trib and I prepare for mid-trib or later. So,
I'll tell people my opinions, but one of my favorite sayings is, hey, nobody in heaven's asking my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and I get just inundated with people on signs and stuff. We had the great eclipse. It's just another eclipse, but that this is going to be a sign of the end time, and it's part of the 3 days of darkness. It's just endless.
Yeah, it's distraction and call to fear. Distraction and call to fear.
Yeah, and
want to generate that.
And what they're doing within the Christian community with people in Christianity that are repeating these scare things is we're losing our credibility. I'm not saying there's not going to be signs and wonders for Christians in the end time to take note of, but we're going to be able to identify.
Good on them.
Yeah.
Good on them, Diane.
Be able to deny it.
Yeah. So this is just something that happens with the laws that God put in place in His creation.
Yeah, and
it's wondrous. I mean, know that it's spectacular, And as looking around, we can see these things are created by God, that you have to have a moon to have life here. It has to be, 400 times closer to the.
No, Vas, that was me who said that. Sun struck the moon and it echoed for hours. It was me who said that.
Earth and the sun and the math to be perfectly blocked out, and that the sun is 400 times bigger than the moon. Another coincidence.
Well,
That's just all. But here's my point: is that if it's going to be something celestial,
oh,
we're gonna
echoes,
know it
right?
as what it is.
Okay, you're right.
How
She said echoes. I said bells ringing.
Defies the laws of creation. So it would be like the sun standing still.
Yeah, miraculous.
Yeah, with Joshua. So
there's no debate about it.
Yeah, it's going to be the earthquake and the darkness at the crucifixion. It's going to be like stars working out of their normal orbit together for the star of Jesus. It's going to be preternatural in a way that can only come from God. That's how you're going to know the signs.
Yeah, and I feel more of those signs, because they are signs, right? But I think they're signs to awaken more of his children, and they're signs and warnings to the evil ones here that I'm still coming. Get ready.
Yeah, exactly.
Remember who really rules on high. But that's so amazing. You're going to be well received here, because my channel's called Get Closer, and my ministry focus is all about helping children of God understand their authority in Christ Jesus, seated with him in the heavenly places, and taking our dominion here in earth, but to experience him for yourself. To not just, listen to anybody, research it all for yourself, and to begin turning your word into prayer dialogue with God, and asking for his Holy Spirit to show you things.
Yeah.
And researching stuff for yourself and having a spiritual experience for yourself.
That's one of the same message I like to provide is would I love non-Christians to hear what I say and read the Bible? Absolutely. But I love Christians who haven't been taught any of this to want to dig deeper into the Bible. Absolutely. That's what I want. I'm not here to convert people. I'm only here to give you information and to encourage you to fully understand why you believe what you believe.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's a reason behind it. And do you even know the reason, or is it just something that you grew up with, or something you get constantly taught over and over again? And do you want to maybe look at things differently and just be prayerful about it so you're not misled?
Yeah, and if we are indeed in the end times, in the victory generation, then our churches we can't rely on. And I think we saw, and I hate to be hard on the church because I'm not here to divide Christians, but if their performance in the pestilence that was here will be any indication of how they're going to be part of the world and its wisdom going forward, you can see that apostasy coming full fold, and it's going to, as Jesus describes, a family against family turning each other in. It's not going to be pleasant. So we need to prepare, and we need to try and plant seeds with people to say, hey, if you don't think something's not right with the world right now, that something's off from what it was, you have seen nothing yet. And you are not going to be able to imagine what is coming.
Right.
And the only way you're going to be able to prepare yourselves is to learn about the Bible.
Learn and taste and know for yourself. Have those experiences for yourself now in him.
And the only two things that God and Jesus promise us, he doesn't promise that we won't go through tribulation.
Right.
In fact, we're told we're going to go through tribulation.
Yes.
And what we are promised is that we're going to be saved from two things. The wrath, because it's not for the righteous.
Nope. Yeah.
So that's the year of the Lord's wrath. That is the last year. And secondly, the hour of trial, hour of temptation. Because even even the elect would be deceived. And so
So
that
unless
hour,
those days were shortened, no flesh would be left alive.
Yeah.
too.
yeah. And so that's why we're saved from the wrath of God, because that's what the point where Jesus comes back, I think, for his third time is for the Armageddon battle, so that not everything is going to be completely destroyed, so that you can have a millennium and people surviving into it. So now, I think that hour of trial, as it's talked about in the 7 churches in Revelation, is the same hour, hora is the Greek word, that's in Revelation 17. The hour, hora, that the 10 kings of the 7th empire hand their power over to Antichrist to destroy Babylon, whom the 10 kings grow to hate because it controls them and they don't get all the wealth. Babylon does. So, and that's the same hour that's described for the destruction of Babylon in the summary of the last 3.5 years in Revelation 14, I think starting at about verse 7 or 8. And also the hour that Babylon is destroyed, in the details of that is the first major event in the last 3.5 years in Revelation 18. And that's and when you get the last times as the time of many antichrists showing up on the earth that the epistles of John are talking about, that last times is the Greek word hora as well. So, and Jesus talks about the hour, hora, that he's coming.
Yeah.
It's
Be
called
watchful.
Watch for the patterns that the Bible uses so that you can recognize and connect verses. And don't let people say you can't, because that's when you have to start dismissing and reimagining verses. So
yeah, when people take it out of context versus trying to connect it.
Yeah, people will tell you that you can't connect trumpets to the end time, other than the trumpets in Revelation. Old Testament.
It has been trumpets heard in the sky all around the world. It's been going on for months, guys.
New Testament, if it's prophetic, if it's a prophecy, that trumpet's there to mark the time.
Yeah. All you got to do is look at previous prophecies that's been fulfilled.
Yeah.
In Yeshua. And I mean, hello.
Yeah. And look for Jesus' sign that's talked about in the oration that he provides to Mark and Luke that Mark and Luke and Matthew record, to the same words that are used in the Old Testament, not necessarily for the church,
hey,
but
Susan,
for
good to see you.
the reconciliation of Judah and lost Israel. Because that's part of his coming, as in Hosea 9:7, in the days of his visitation, just as Luke talks about the days of the Son of Man, not singular, but days. He's coming for rapture, second Exodus, and Armageddon.
Yeah.
And
he's not going to be the Jesus everybody makes him out to be. He's going to be a bad dude.
When you see the word Israel, when you see prophecies, end time prophecies in the Old Testament that say banner, ensign, or standard, that's Jesus's sign. And you start to read those words in that context, and the best way you do it all goes back to the same Hebrew word. But understand, you start to connect how you can do Old Testament prophecies and connect with New Testament prophecies. Even though it's written in Greek versus Hebrew, there's cognate words that are in place that you can use. Like you have ellipses for tribulation, as in the tribulation of the saints in Revelation 7, or the great tribulation in Matthew 24:21, which is a separate from the tribulation of the saints. And unfortunately, we don't get good translations as well. So ellipses is translated before the abomination in Jesus's chronology as affliction. And it's also translated elsewhere as affliction. It's part of the meaning, but from a timing perspective, you have to understand that there's two tribulations. And so how I will produce now an example to show why you have to be careful with this is that in where it says in the great tribulation versus the tribulation of the saints that happens before the abomination, which is Revelation 7, which the ones in Revelation 6 are told to wait for to come out of the great tribulation, ellipses. Then you have the great tribulation of the world not seen since creation. It's distinctly different. And then in the cognate verse in Mark 13, where you get that same prophecy after the abomination, it doesn't say tribulation there. It's translated as affliction, and it's the same Greek word. And it's the cognate word for Sarah in Hebrew for the time of Jacob's quote-unquote trouble.
Great trouble, yeah.
And the kickoff to the second Exodus that Jacob is going to be saved out of and busted out by the breaker by Jehovah for the second Exodus, as the book of Micah links into those passages. And that it's the same word that's used when Michael stands in the time of trouble, the time of the resurrection of the Jewish people, which is the midpoint of the last 7 years, when Michael's also standing in Revelation 12, the battle with Satan and his angels, after Antichrist has come to power. And Antichrist has come to power because in Daniel 8:10, he is going to try and raise his throne to heaven like Lucifer tried to do, or Satan tried to do. He's going to throw down some of the starry host after he comes to power.
Yeah.
It's the same battle, and it's the same time frame.
Yeah. So I'm a big proponent for going hard after this research, and your books are just so the knowledge that you have and that you compiled is so amazing, and that gives you a lot of context and a lot of stuff to research out for yourself. And I'm a big proponent of asking for Holy Spirit, because Yeshua said he is the great teacher. He is to teach you all things and bring in remembrance everything I said.
Yeah.
So, I mean, rely on him.
Pray for that extra support.
Yes.
So that's why book 2 has a little bit different subtitle to it. So the subtitle of book 1 is how the descendants of giants, how secrets.
Susan, it's hard to come to any other conclusion. It's not just judgment on America, but we know they've got to take America out first before they can come after the rest of the West. So you guys are going down first by the looks of it, and we're not going to be far behind it, because we're one of the ones they use as a test case to do it to, like they're doing with the banking system and all that. They're testing it out on the Australian banks. Diane's posted links to it.
And the descendants of giants plan to enslave humankind.
Yeah.
Book 2 is called How Understanding Prehistory and Giants Helps to Define End Time Prophecy.
Wow, that's cool. I can't wait to get it. That's amazing. What I was gonna go ahead.
I was gonna say, so book 1 is as unique as book 2, but in a different way and targeted at Christians. So it's going to cover off things that no other book has covered off.
That's awesome.
It's as unique as book 1, and a lot of people like the work of Dr. Heiser. I've not read his work; I've only heard about it. But from the little I've seen for excerpts and what people have told me about it, this book 2 would be also Genesis 6 Conspiracy 1 on steroids for Christians, and it's not redundant. It's additional information, and it's mostly biblically based. And it would be Dr. Heiser on steroids. So when I talk about the application of Philipses or Hora or Rapha or Saba or any of those types of words that I've been sort of flashing around, you get that in book 2. You get the Christian information you need to check my veracity.
Well, yeah, and the cool thing about book 1 is that it's titled and laid out too. So if you only want to know, like, put a couple pieces together of this secret society or this giant group or this point in history, he's laid it out beautifully to where it's like subcontext all the way through, so you can just go right to that and learn about that if you want.
Yeah. So I'm going to take back, and as I give you information, the first section is just information Christians need to read the Bible in a larger context.
Yeah.
And it's just so important, but you don't have to read those, but you'll want to.
I was never here. We got a great little family here, haven't we? We got about 9 or 10 of us, and we all know what's going on. We're all up to date with everything, and we all have a good time together. So yeah, we got a good thing going on here.
Go back to read.
I don't care. I'm on 260 subs. If I was chasing subs, I'd get you to give me thumbs up. I don't care how many watch, so long as we can chill together.
But as I move forward, I mean, I'm going to take all of these patriarchal stations that are listed in the Bible, and I'm going to take them back to a Rephaim patriarch.
Wow.
I'm going to give all the giant nations that I could identify, show
Amen,
you how we
Susan.
understand that
Amen.
these are giant nations, and take them back to a Rephaim patriarch as well.
Wow.
Then I'm going to go through with all that information on the angelic order, the information you need in one, all the different kinds of hybrids. 6 to 9 feet would be the hybrids, more 7 to 9 feet would be the general average, versus giants being taller.
Yeah, this is the kind of stuff you're not gonna get in a seminary school or going to somebody's theology lessons. And
then I'm going to use that base of information to walk through the War of Giants in a way that I don't do in book 1, just
cool.
on steroids. And then I'm going to cover off all the different battles and campaigns of the Exodus Wars. So it starts with the Battle of Rephidim, the Battle of Aphraim 40 years later, the Eastern Campaign, the Central Campaign, the Northern Campaign, and the Mountain and Southern Campaign. Then I'm going to go into the Book of Judges and show you how those wars that are associated with Israel and the people attacking them are connected to giants, and show you where you get that information. Go through all of that through the Book of Judges. Then I'm going to do the same thing in the Wars of King Saul, the Wars of King David, and the Wars of King Solomon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then I'm going to get into anti-prophecy.
Just from the, and then if after that.
And some secret society stuff as I do the transition.
That's amazing, man. But yeah, the dudes, David's mighty men, oh my goodness, they were no joke.
No, they were.
Read about that in the Bible and you'd be like, what? And it's and you'll see the offspring and the DNA manipulation and the lion men of Moab. And it makes sure telling you in the Bible, and this is all Bible people, it tells you about the guy who killed 2 lion-like men of Moab. And you can't just describe them as, you can't make it seem like they were just lions, because right after that it says, and he killed a lion on a snowy day.
So I'm going to save it for book 4 on really getting detailed into that. Finish book 3. I do make some references to these different kinds of giants in book 2. So I would encourage people to look at Cherubim.
Yeah, I saw that.
Cherubim.
Yeah.
I saw that redacted link. They did say that.
4-faced
It's like,
angels.
what the heck? I can't imagine the job of John and Ezekiel and Isaiah and all of these great men of faith that we had, our fathers of our faith, describing this stuff that they're experiencing and seeing in the heavens.
Yeah. So you have, and I understand that these were watchers.
Right.
And
there's good watchers and the fallen ones, right?
Yeah. So they had a human head. They had a face also of an ox or a bull. I would go for bull. They had a face of an eagle or a bird.
Yeah.
And face of a lion.
Yeah.
Now, one of the kings in the War of Giants, Arioch, means lion-like. Ari and Ariel is in lion and lion of God. Take that back to Hebrew. And there's an Avim god, a giant, one of the post-Diluvian giants, and they lived in different pockets. I'll give you ideas where these giants lived as well in book 2. And one of the areas was in the Mesopotamian region, and the Avim god worshipped a god named Nergal as the war god of the Sumerian pantheon. And he's depicted as a lion-faced god.
Wow.
And so I think, and you get lion-faced gods in most of the pantheons. Egyptian has a number of them, whether it's Mahis or Bast and other ones, Sekhmet. So if they produced giants, they would produce ones that looked like them if they took the face of a lion. So now if you can imagine that you have a eagle.
Right.
And you look at Anunnaki on reliefs in Sumeria, you have these winged creatures, really stocky legs and wide, like that sort of kind of a stoutness, but these are angelic beings. And they have wings, and they're depicted in two ways. One has a human's head,
One has a
and
bird's
one has an
head.
eagle's head.
Yeah.
Both of a cherubim, right?
Wow.
And so if they took a human's head, maybe that was the dark-haired variety that Gilgamesh in the Syrian giants and some of the Greek giants were produced by, and more
Okay,
warrior-like,
Susan, good night.
as in the warrior
Hope you
gods.
too,
just
so
as
okay.
cherubim were like a warrior-like angel, just as they protected Eden with a flaming sword before the flood, after the ostracization of Adam and Eve. Yeah, and then if you look at the creatures that are described as gods and giants in Southeast Asia, Tengu gods, which are watcher gods like the seraphim gods and part of the same grouping of gods there, they're depicted as birds and serpents. So in this case, a cherubim taking one face. And they produce Tengu warriors and priests, Tengu. If people Google that, they're going to get these eagle-faced, bird-faced creatures. And in the Popol Vuh, these are the Xibalba demigods that had owl faces. And there's one particular one that's the House of Camazotz, as a branch of them. That's the House of the Bat. And you Google Camazotz and you get the outfit that Batman wears. But
Wow.
so, and when cherubim took an image on the earth, they would generally only take one face. So if you see a sphinx, it's going to have one face, whether it's a human or a lion's face. If you look at the caribs, which are the same thing throughout the Middle East, they're going to have, a bull's face. They're going to have, one of the faces of the cherubim. They're the same angelic creature. And the gargoyles would be the bird face.
Wow. Yeah. Some kind of bird, too.
Yeah, some kind of bird. So, in book 4, I'm going to look at
all those are
ancient
ancient symbolisms that you could find in every cult, like all the different ancient symbolisms in the cultures, from the coat of arms to the gods they worshiped. Yeah, all kinds of stuff. That's so interesting. I was going to ask you.
Just so we don't get this totally without some biblical support, and I won't spend a whole time on this. So, along with that Abin god with the Nergal god, and this sort of takes it into another classification of gods. You have a god that the Abin worship that was named Nibaz, Nibaz. And take that back to Hebrew, and it means a barking god. Wow. And it was depicted with a dog's head.
Whoa.
So now you start to get into dogmen and stuff like that, and you look at gods like Anubis, and we get references to jackals as gods
in the
Bible
thing.
Yeah, that if they and there's so much historical information on the dog warrior gods. They're classified as lower than the other types of giants, and mostly were mercenaries. And so Anubis created so many of these giant warriors. He created a city for them called Sinopolis, as the Greeks called it. Opolis means city. Sino is their word for cynocephalus, for dogmen.
Whoa. The Dogman City.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they're all over the world as well too. So.
Yeah. So I would wait and ask you. Have you heard about the Native American encounters here, just in America, North America, and with I think it was Wild Bill, who had one of the Old West guys. I can't remember if it was Wild Bill or if it was a different character along the same, very similar name. He was really good friends with natives, and they took him and showed him the caves about their ancient drawings, and showed him femur bones that were bigger, like as big as.
Okay, is he talking about Buffalo Bill?
Him, and then he has a diary that they've done away with, of depictions of him drawing stuff that was in the caves, and they had a dark-haired giant Rephaim looking scary dude with claws, having one buffalo in the hand and ripping off the other one while he's running with the buffalo.
Gilgamesh, like in terms of the size, right?
It was like,
so
whoa.
in depiction. So
And they knew
So-
about this stuff, and that was like,
Sure.
you know,
all
1800.
the First Nations in North America, Central America, South America talk about the giants.
Yep.
And the Hopi say that the original giants they understood them as the white snake clan that came from an island in Atlantis, in the Atlantic Ocean. And so some of them were seraphim, but also you get these, red-haired ones, which is the more common one that's talked about. But yeah, and it's trouble is,
Shawnee, Russia's thrived on the sanctions the US put on them because the US put sanctions on them. They rely on their own produce now, so they're more self-reliant. So what US tried to do to Russia backfired because now Russia is much more self-sufficient and they own all the gas they're selling to Germany and Sweden and that. So they can switch that off anytime they want.
I didn't do a lot about Africa or First Nations. It was all oral traditions. You don't get anything sort of in writing for history. So, but I recognize that they're in all different cultures around the world, and I think the First Nations counting in there, like I say, it's little people, Sasquatch, Nephilim.
Well, I've heard the whole
all
thing
in
why
all
they went
cultures.
like this, and they said how. They wanted to see if you had 6 fingers.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's why they go how.
yeah,
Like from afar. They're like,
Yep.
do I need to get ready to kill you? Or
yeah. And so there's been a lot of discoveries of these bones in North America, and the First Nations had a lot of wars against them to eliminate them because you can't live with these tribes of giants that try and wipe you out.
Yeah.
So there's a link that I have that if people want to get a hold of me, just send me a note, and it is old newspaper stories. And so,
send you an email for that.
yeah, and
You're already
the other-
sending me stuff. So
Yeah, well, list all of the stuff because I'll forget. Because,
yeah, I'll have to go back and listen to the recording.
Yeah.
This is a lot of amazing information.
Yeah,
Anyway.
And on this has a spreadsheet where it's going to give you descriptions and information sort of in summary on a spreadsheet. But as you scroll to the right on the Excel spreadsheet, it has a link to the newspaper story.
Oh wow.
And you can go read it for yourself from the original, and it ranges from 1850 to about 1950 in North America. There's a few other ones in there from Mexico and a couple other places, but predominantly in the United States.
I'm surprised they still have those up. As good
Yeah.
a job as they do trying to hide all
Yeah, I
of that
know.
stuff.
So yeah, so it's just one of those things to show you that there's a conspiracy. There's no way of getting around it to hide this information. So what happens with all of these discoveries in North America and all of these ones that are listed on the spreadsheet is that 2 things will happen once the discovery happens. A, the local university is going to be called. They're going to send their people out. They're going to pack it up, take it to the university, call the Smithsonian.
And bury it.
They go there, and then they're never seen again. Or the more direct approach is whoever discovers it calls the Smithsonian directly. They come get it all,
And
take
it's
it
never
back to
seen
the
again.
Smithsonian, and it's never seen again.
Yeah. They probably covered up and done, who knows, dumped it in the ocean or kept it in their secret wherever they do with it.
Yeah.
They have more stuff they try to hide than they'll ever be able to put in the Smithsonian.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating, man. Yeah.
Okay, guys, this one's over. I'll finish with James Caddis. You recognise him when I put him up. Oh, I'm not finished. I've still got a bit more time.
Moving home? Don't do it alone. Downsizing? No compromising. Need some space? We know a place.
Because the day that we are recording this episode, it is April.
Countdown to Eternity starts now.
Well, hello, my dear brothers and sisters. I want to welcome you to another episode of Countdown to Eternity. And this one is going to be unusual and actually quite exceptional. And I'm very confident about that assertion because the day that we are recording this episode, it is April the 1st. Yes, this is Joe Biden Day, official Joe Biden Day. But, but many of the things that we are going to talk about will be the past to you. Because when we release this, we will release this literally a week and a half later. And we are going to make some assertions about some of the events that are happening, that we're speaking about, that we're so confident about, we don't mind recording them before the events. And the other thing is, Tom's going to be doing a lot of the talking about it anyway. So
that's great.
What's going on, Tommy?
That is great. So, I mean, there are so many different things going on. You know, we're going to get into these things here in just a second. But did you know Florida got hit with 4,000 lightning bolts in 15 minutes? I don't, you know, that sounds like a lot to me.
Look, I'm just going to say this because this is not like people used to think that you were cuckoo or I was cuckoo if you had a conversation about stuff like this. Yeah. But weather modification isn't even a question anymore. I mean, we just talked about this. I showed you. I turned you onto that site that the city of Santa Ana just put out. They're like, yeah, we modify the weather. And we have notable results, and we're bragging about it, and we're here to stay, and we're putting all kinds of alloy in the air, all kinds of metals, and we're, you know, and so if you go look at the flight charts, you can find the TFRs. They're everywhere, the temporary flight restrictions, everywhere. These are weather modification flights, and it's amazing to see how they're painting the sky, literally doing the kind of things that they're doing. That doesn't surprise me. My question is, was this an intended outcome, or was this them trying to play God and realizing they messed up and it ain't going to work?
It's probably one or the other. I mean, isn't it weird, James, how much rain we have? I mean, I was born and raised in California. It's a desert. The last 3 years, it's been rain and rain and rain and rain. And so, but going back to Florida, you know what? It makes me question. It does make me. It gives me more questions, which I'm not prepared to address today. But I think you and I should have a private conversation. I want to pick your brain, and then when we're ready, I want to go public with some things from the Bible.
No, I would agree. Yeah, that's a great idea. We should have that conversation. I think it's interesting because mankind has very few limitations on its capacity because we were created in the likeness and image of God. Not that we are God and not that we function at the capacity of God, but we do function in his image and likeness. And there are things that mankind is capable of when given to righteousness, become beautiful. When given to wickedness, bro, it is disgusting.
Well,
it's evil.
It is. So let me read this as long as we're on the subject, right? You go back to the Tower of Babel. What's the Lord say? The Lord said, indeed, the people are one and they all have one language. And this is what they begin to do. Now, nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them.
That's right.
That's what you're saying. And you start looking at technology and even weather modification. Listen, if God said this was available thousands of years ago, that man could achieve that. Think of where we are right now with all of the bragging they do. And like the website you sent me, that's a government office saying, yeah, this is what we do. And yet people will say, it reminds me of the Great Reset. Remember when you and I said, hey, there's a Great Reset going on. I remember the New York Times going after anybody like us saying there's no Great Reset while we were holding Klaus Schwab's book of the Great Reset. You're like, look, they're telling us they're doing these things. God says man could get to a point, and we'll get to a point where there's nothing he proposes to do will be withheld from him. So weather modification, and I'm thinking interesting things. So 4,000 lightning bolts in Florida. It wouldn't surprise me if the feds and the globalists hate Florida because of what it slowly has become a thorn in their side. Texas too. So, you know,
bro, I listen.
Does he mean Florida has become a little bit more independent, such as Texas? Because that's what he just suggested. Is that what he said?
this doesn't even require debate. This kind of stuff is happening on its face. We see the data. I mean, the data's in front of us. You don't have to lie about the data. The data's right there. The data speaks the truth. And quite frankly, it's happening, and it's happening everywhere. And
it's always just about taking a few steps. You know that you can tackle absolutely anything.
And look, I
Hey,
it's a
Barry,
running
you gonna
joke with
say,
my wife
right?
now. We'll walk outside and we'll see them painting the sky with all of these lines. We know exactly what's going on. You confirm it. You know, I grab just one of my basic applications on my phone where I can just look up items in the ADSB database, and you look up and you realize there are TFRs everywhere, all over the place. You can't fly here. You can't fly there. You can't fly here. You can't fly there. Why? Because we're doing flights where we're modifying the weather. And it's a joke right now. Now it's become really funny because I'll step outside. I'll tell my wife, baby, does the weather say it's going to rain tomorrow? And she'll go, no, baby, I'm telling you right now, it's going to rain. Because you wait until tomorrow morning, that weather report's going to change and it's going to rain. And sure enough, boom, it just comes down. You know what I mean? And it's crazy, absolutely crazy.
It is, and you know, we're used to a desert. It ain't a desert out here. Then you look at fires. I mean, you start looking at Maui. I mean, we're
Okay, this is 7 days old. This is before the floods in Dubai's airport.
we aren't even going to talk about this stuff right now. You start looking at things, sure makes you wonder. And then again, that's at the Tower of Babel. This is a long time ago. God says, this is what man is going to do if I don't stop it.
That's right.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
8.
Yep.
Are you ready for this, James?
Okay, let's talk about it. So we're talking about 8 extremely unusual events that will happen during the month of April.
So here we are.
I can guess a few of them right off the bat.
Oh, I know you can. Okay, here's the first one. As we enter the month of April, this is from Michael Snyder, by the way. The Devil Comet has become visible to the naked eye in the northern hemisphere. What is the Devil Comet? It's the Mother of Dragons Comet. It's currently visible in the night skies of the northern hemisphere, providing a unique spectacle for both amateur stargazers and professional astronomers. This is the very first time that we've been able to see this comet with the naked eye in 71 years. It will continue to be visible for those in the northern hemisphere. So what this article does, it takes 8 different signs in the sky, so to speak. It says, is it a coincidence? It basically asks the question, is it a coincidence that all of these things happen to be happening in April? All right, you ready for another one?
Yeah, but the comet thing is so spectacularly interesting because when we see it, especially at night, it's just going to look like.
Okay, Phil, good night, mate.
The Hale-Bopp comet.
Hale-Bopp.
Yeah, I remember that.
Nike, wasn't that the Nike one?
Man,
everybody put on their Nikes and it was that Colt. Remember that Colt?
Oh yeah. They were the oh gosh, I forgot the name of the Colt.
They're
But
down in San Diego somewhere. Yeah,
it's crazy what happened there. And we'll see another one of these Colts come up and do this.
Heaven's Gate Colt, is that the Colt he's talking about?
And this comet's going to be visible for quite some time, by the way.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
It's called.
As a matter of fact, say again.
Isn't it interesting? It's called the Devil Comet, the Mother of Dragons.
Yeah. Bro, I don't even want to go into that. But if you think about this, bro, 30 kilometers, the nucleus of it is 30 kilometers in diameter. So we're going to watch this thing. It's going to be very, very visible. As a matter of fact, at the time of this recording, it will start to actually become very visible to us.
I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'll be able to see it in the sky here pretty soon.
Well, on April 4th, which is now it's future for you and me. It's past for all of your viewers.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so they'll walk outside if there's a clear day and they haven't modified the weather, and you can actually look at the sky and be able to see it.
There you go. An extraordinary alignment of 4 planets just 4 days before the great apocalypse of 2024. The great American eclipse of 2020. But I mean, so many people are saying, hey, it's the apocalypse. So,
Now, I know about this one, bro.
Okay.
This is an interesting one because this is the astronomy stuff I just really follow. And if I remember correctly, I think it's Venus, Mars, Saturn, and I want to say Neptune, even though Neptune won't be visible to the naked eye. But it is interesting to see that. It's going to be, I mean, Neptune is never really visible to the naked eye. You're never going to really, I mean, we have been able to see Neptune. Yeah, too far away. But it is, man, that's an interesting one. That's a really interesting one because that you know, we're going to talk about the weird ideas that people have with respect to the alignment of the planets and all that. We'll get into that in a little bit. But anyway,
Okay.
Okay.
If we have time, we
Yeah.
do have time because this is the next one. You're right. On April 8th, which, the 7 other planets in our solar system, along with the sun and the moon, will appear to form a straight line in the sky when looking from Jerusalem toward the east. This was discovered by Rachel Baxter.
You are your data. Hackers are committing kidnapping against your digital selves, and they're able to exploit that for a lot of money.
The line in the sky from Jerusalem looking towards the east. Isn't that rather interesting? I think of the wise men, the magi from the east, looking up at the star in the sky. It's very interesting. So Rachel, she asked ChatGPT to tell her how rare it is to have a straight line like this. And ChatGPT said, get this. Are you sitting down, James? Get this.
I'm listening.
It could only happen once in every 32 million years. 32 million years. It is happening on April 8th.
Oh my goodness.
Or it happened on April 8th by the time everybody watches this program.
What are we gonna do? Well,
there's more.
In 32 million years.
Once in 32 million years. That's a really long time.
Should we fly to Israel for this? Let's just go to Jerusalem. Should we go to Jerusalem for this?
Actually, let's see. That we have to get there by. Why not? I'm all in for going to Israel.
Goodness gracious, man, that would be. It's okay. Granted, that one's interesting, but this one,
okay,
the next one, bro.
All right,
everybody, stand the heck by.
Okay, CERN, right? The Large Hadron Collider, the world's largest and most powerful particle accelerator, is set to smash protons together on April 8th to search for invisible particles secretly powering our universe. Theories have suggested there are 17 different particle groups, and the European Organization for Nuclear Research, better known as CERN, confirmed the existence of one using this Large Hadron Collider in 2012. Now the team has restarted the collider with hopes of unraveling more mysteries of the universe, specifically dark matter. Why in the world would CERN choose to do this on April 8th? Now, it continues. I mean, people have speculated, hey, this thing could be opening up some kind of portal to the demonic world. And people have told me I'm nuts. I don't know if you've looked at that yourself, but people have told me I'm nuts for saying that. But I look at this, you really got to wonder these are mad scientists and the occult practices that take place there. I mean, they have these celebrations, they have these giant festivals, and they are fully demonic, the stuff that they do there.
Yep, and the data doesn't lie, bro. There are events that we know have happened in the world that are just outrageous, that are directly tied to activity with this particle accelerator. It's interesting when you think about this. And as a matter of fact, the last time that CERN made a bunch of headlines, there was a lot of stuff that was happening in the background that not a lot of people were talking about. And it's funny because the reason why a lot of people weren't willing to talk about it is because they don't want to be labeled as crazy.
Yeah.
Even though what's true is true. It's kind of an interesting thing. But this one is kind of a big deal, right?
I think it's
and the whole dark matter thing, that's always playing God. You start getting into all the dark matter stuff, bro. I mean, who knows where that's going to end up going? It's not going to be good.
Why do they want to do this? I mean, they've even talked about how everything it could turn that area into a black hole and suck everything in. That's not going to happen because we know the book of Revelation gives us, the entire Bible does. It tells us the direction things are going to go and how it's going to finish. It's not going to finish with Earth becoming a black hole. We know that.
That's right.
However, could it be opening up a demonic porthole? I mean, you look at Revelation chapter 9, and what do you have? These demons out of the abyss. I mean, is God using that? Because God's the sovereign one. Does he use that?
Yes. There's always a distinct possibility that it could be done that way, bro. One of the things I've learned to do over the years is the same thing you've learned to do, and that's not to speculate just based on some, outrageous assumption that the average Joe might make on information that isn't viable, right? But this is not the case here. This information is like super, super, super viable stuff. Like this is not a small. I mean, this has the potential to become a very, very, very ugly thing on a lot of levels. And by the way, for the record, bro, it has. It's not like it hasn't before. It has. There's a lot of weird activity that's happened around the world that's tied to this particle accelerator.
Yes, sir.
So
there's quite a lot of support for people going through transit.
IXL, proudly celebrating 165 years, creating high-quality bathroom heating, lighting and ventilation products.
I mean, that's why they shut it down all the time. There's a lot. Now, don't get me wrong. I do think that there is a lot of manipulation of people's emotions and minds based on the decisions that they make to do things. Like, could it be that the reason why they chose to do it during the eclipse has nothing to do with anything scientific, but they did it just to get people to go, woo, maybe. But what if there is something scientifically related to this? What if there is something related to the alignment of planets and the, all of the, who knows? I mean, I will tell you, admittedly, that I am speaking from a place of pretty significant ignorance when it comes to the level of science that's involved with this accelerator. But I know enough to know that something is undoubtedly a lot more intentional than non-intentional. How about we put it that way?
Yeah, I do believe there's evil intentions that are here too, because I've watched their ceremonies that they've done there, and there's definitely demonic things that are happening there. And listen, we know the heart of man is deceitful and wicked. We know that people are man-centered; they're narcissistic by nature. So, and we have a world that has rejected God. So when we start looking at what does man want to do? Man wants to be God. Man wants to play God. The light in the Garden of Eden. Why didn't you listen, Eve? God knows that the day you eat of the fruit, listen, you won't surely die, but you'll be like God. This is the same lie that people are striving for today, to not die and to be like God. So it shouldn't surprise us when we start talking about these kind of things. And again, we go back to Genesis chapter 11. What's God say? Nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them. So these are things that men are proposing. They may never have success that they want with the CERN Hadron Collider, but nevertheless, their intentions are there. They're attempting to do it. And you still have this happening on April 8th, which is interesting. It could be just to get people all worked up. That's true. It could be just playing another mind game with people to see if they can push the limits with prophecy people. Who knows? But I find it rather interesting. We know there's certain experiments that have been done at the South Pole that have affected other things. So, you look at this, you go, interesting stuff, to say the least. Okay?
Yeah, undoubtedly, bro. And it's a very interesting thing. And it is. I do think that you have to ask the question, why in the world would they do this on April the 8th?
Yeah, well, there's more coming on April 8th. You ready? Again,
yeah, let's hear this.
Past for everybody who's listening to this right now, but for you and me, it's still future. The most anticipated event of April is the Great American Eclipse of 2024. USA Today calling it the astronomical event of a decade. So a decade is 10 years. So does that mean something more incredible happened 11 years ago? I mean, when you start thinking about it, you start going, do we work up too much to do about something that's not going to really translate into much?
Yeah.
I mean, there's been a lot of eclipses.
A lot.
Yeah. So, so this is what I think. My prediction. We'll go through CERN. We'll go through the alignment of the planets. We're going to go through the eclipse again. There's April 1. Everybody listening is going to look back. I say that we're still here on April 10th, and nothing out of the ordinary has happened that doesn't seem to happen all the time going wrong. A bridge went down when a boat ran into it. Remember that a couple weeks back?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So things will continue to go wrong, but I believe we're still going to be here moving forward. And a lot of people are going to lose their minds over what we're talking about just these things because I don't know, they'll just be bothered about them anyways. But I believe everything is going to continue. I do believe there's weather modification. I do believe these things are going on, but I do believe we're still going to be here on April 9th and April 10th, and we're still going to be preaching about Jesus coming again.
Not since I was a
100%.
teen, Shawnee.
And people are going to be watching this video going, "Yep, they were right." And look, I've heard everything people say, everything from the rapture is going to happen that day to all kinds of other insane, wild, crazy things. You remember, bro, when we were hearing people say the rapture is going to happen September the 25th, and then there was one guy that was out there that was trying to convince people based on terrible teaching from the book of Peter, right, that the rapture was going to happen on the 19th, based on the 19th of September last year, based on some morning star prediction. When you hear guys like that make predictions like that, run away from them. They're false teachers. It's like the craziness of all of that, right? When you hear people do that, this is what I wait for. I wait for them to come out and go, "I screwed up. I'm sorry. I had a lapse of judgment. I was sick in the head for a day." All of that. The funny thing is, they don't do that.
Okay, you like me, James. You like me. So I told people, they were getting so mad at me. August, September, when I say, look, I'm not worried about the rapture happening on a September night or even thinking about it, September 19th or September 25th. I told people, come back and talk to me in October. Come back and talk to me in November. Apologize to me if I'm wrong. And I promise you, if we are being raptured, I will high five you on the way up for me being wrong and you being right. But I didn't get one apology, and I had lost a lot of subscribers during that time. A whole lot of people livid with me, and you the same thing for telling the truth. It's like, look, people get so caught up in these things, and the eclipse, and listen, the events of the Hadron Collider, whatever man achieves, listen, we're still going to be here. And I do believe the rapture is imminent. It could happen at any moment.
I agree.
But I am not putting these April events into the category of us being raptured or any great, the day that X marks the spot. Hey, you know what? Listen, things are going to continue exactly as the Bible says they're going to. And they're going to happen according to God's perfect timeline. And too many people in the prophecy world read way too much into some signs.
Yeah. Number 6.
Number 6, April 8th. Man, everything's April 8th. Wow. As the eclipse passes over America on April 8th, NASA will be firing 3 rockets into the moon's shadow.
Bro, I don't know. I
guess what are they trying to do? And what will be a total solar eclipse for 115 miles wide path through parts of Mexico, 15 U.S. states, Canada. Okay, we know that. The event will see a sudden drop in sunlight. All right, I get that, but I don't get it. But for some strange reason, NASA has chosen to name this project after a serpent deity that was popular in ancient Egypt. Well, that doesn't surprise me. Ra. Oh, the sun deity Ra. I guess that's what they named it after. Is that right? Am I reading that right?
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, you are.
Well, that's bizarre. I mean, why would you do that? Wow. That's just weird.
Bro, this is just all like government agencies. And maybe it's just because of the president we have. They're all being given to just pagan nonsense, bro.
Hi, Darren. Good to see you, mate.
Like it's NASA.
Yeah.
Come on. Whatever. That's just crazy. Okay.
Yeah. So, all right.
Number 7.
I know we don't got a lot of time left. Let me get through this. Ominously, on April 8th, the Great American Eclipse of 2024 will complete the giant X over the New Madrid fault zone that the Great American Eclipse of 2017 began. All right. So, okay, it's over the fault zone. So I'm looking at that, James. Is a thought that it's going to trigger this great earthquake in that place? Is that what it's like?
Probably.
Here's the X. Now, what if, okay, okay, let's say, James, everybody's listening to this after the fact. We're saying this before the fact. All right, I'll do this. I'm going to go on air right now, on record. if I'm wrong, if there's a great earthquake in the New Madrid Fault when X marks the spot, and the CERN calculator, the CERN collider does whatever it does, and all these cataclysmic events start happening, I'm going to come on the James Cadiz show. I'll be on everybody's show and I'll say, I was wrong. All right? I'll do that. I'll say I was wrong.
I'll be happy to do the same thing, but we're not going to do that.
Okay.
I'm just telling you, it is going to happen.
Okay. Okay, ready? Are you ready?
Okay, what's the next one, bro?
Right.
I just
last one. During the month of April, a Psychotopolis. Those are those little insects, right? It's
the Psychotopolis. The Psychotopolis.
For the first time since Thomas Jefferson was president, billions of 13-year cicadas and billions of 17-year cicadas will emerge from the ground simultaneously.
How do they know?
They do it based on the like they lay eggs and they're in the ground for so long. So that's how they know it's going to be really bad. So they know it's going to be bad.
Okay, so Tommy, we're out of time.
Yeah.
All right. We have these predictions. Yeah. We have all these strange things that are going to happen in April. Whatever. I'm giving you the final word, bro. What do we do with all this? How do you take this home?
Look, don't be distracted by a lot of things. A lot of things are nonsense. James, I actually wonder if some of these things are psyops that are thrown out there to distract people that are reading their Bibles or just whatever it is. Get you all sidetracked and make you determined to or plan to make you look like you're wearing a tinfoil hat. Don't get turned to the left. Don't get turned to the right. There's going to be all kinds of deception. We know that deception is only going to increase in the last days. Jesus said, if possible, even the elect would be deceived. Listen, don't be deceived. Don't turn to the left. Don't turn to the right. All kinds of stories are going to continue to increase. Who knows? We're still early in 2024. By the end of this year, we could hear a lot more stories. Stay focused on Jesus Christ, the author and finisher of our faith.
Yeah, amen to that. Amen and amen. And with that, I think that is a great way to end this show.
Okay, guys, I'll finish with Prophecy with Stan as per usual. This looks like a good one. Actually, I'm not going to play that one because I want to leave this one up. Give me a sec, guys. Come on, ad. Hang on, guys.
There was just a lot of numbness. That's a real word. You know, I didn't have emotions growing up. Life was sad. Life was painful. I didn't want it to continue. And I realized that in my whole life, I had never actually thought about God. If somebody believed in God, if somebody said they were religious, I just thought they were stupid. Not only was I having thoughts of taking my life, at this point, I actually attempted not just once, but 3 nights in a row. It is more something than I thought. All of my grandparents were born in Eastern Europe, Yiddish-speaking Jews coming to America in the early part of the 20th century. When I was growing up, we were no longer Orthodox, but we were very definitely Jewish. For example, every year at Passover, I would ask the 4 questions, of course, beginning with, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot. Why is this night different from all other nights? And every year we gave the same answers, but did I believe it? The story of Moses and Pharaoh,
Sorry, Darren, I was just looking up what to play. I'll read your comment.
the plagues, the miracles, did I really believe all that? No, of course not. Did anyone actually believe that? The idea of Jesus having anything at all to do with my life was just unthinkable.
Arnie Schwarzenegger does a version. I bet that'd be great.
There was one time I remember I was young. I was at a mall or maybe a department store in December. They used to play the Christmas carols on the loudspeakers. And I heard things like, "O come, Emmanuel," and "Ransom captive Israel." And another one talks about little town of Bethlehem. And I thought, wait a minute, are we sure this has nothing to do with us? It doesn't sound that foreign. I suffered from severe depression. And even as a very young child, I was having thoughts of suicide. And I didn't really know why, because on the outside, things actually looked pretty good. So when I got to high school, my plan was very simple. Just keep my head down, hope that it doesn't last forever, and just try to get through it. And in college, I was a disc jockey, and that was something very new for me. And I could even say, for the first time in my life, I was having fun. But it didn't last. I started having the old feelings and the old thoughts that I had when I was growing up. But now it was a little bit different, because not only was I having thoughts of taking my life, at this point, I actually attempted suicide, not just once, but 3 nights in a row by taking large amounts of pills and alcohol. After the 3rd night, I was found and I was taken by ambulance to the hospital. It is more something than I thought.
Beth just used BPay to schedule her water bill for payday. In the security of her online banking, BPay can't keep...
I went back home to New York, and while I was there, I learned some things about my family that I had never known before. For example, both of my grandfathers had actually committed suicide. And I would also later learn that one other, a great-grandfather back in the old country, did as well. The one point of optimism I had was having just hit rock bottom, I had nowhere to go but up. So I decided to give it a go, life. And I tried different jobs and different things, wasn't successful at anything. And I wasn't quite at the point of having the old thoughts, but I guess the best way I could explain it is I was maybe thinking about it. And then one day, out of the blue, I heard some very shocking news. A Jewish friend of mine came and told me that she now believes that Jesus is the Messiah. Right away, I started to say, what are you talking about? This isn't right. He's not for us. And by the next day, I realized I was very curious. And I realized that in my whole life, I had never actually thought about God. Prior to that, it was always very easy. If somebody believed in God, if somebody said they were religious, I just thought they were stupid. I wanted to begin at the beginning. So I started reading the book of Genesis. I read through it, I pored over it. All the while I was wrestling with the material. And by the time I finished the book of Genesis, I realized I was no longer just wrestling with an ancient text. I was wrestling with the living God. Now, my job that summer was selling ice cream from a cart right in the middle of New York City. So all day long, I sold ice cream, and that gave me plenty of time to think about everything I was reading. And I decided I want to jump ahead and start reading about Jesus. I had never read the New Testament in my life. I had never been in a church for any reason. I knew about the Crusades and the Inquisition, and I knew about the blood libels and the pogroms. And obviously there's no good news in any of that. But now I'm going to the source. What in the world am I going to find in the pages of the New Testament? I'm now reading the story of a Jewish man who lived in a Jewish place and taught a group of Jewish followers and celebrated Jewish holidays and claimed to be the fulfillment of Jewish writings, on every single page of the New Testament, there is some kind of reference to Moses and the Jewish prophets. A number of times, Jesus had discussions with the leaders, and he was often calling them out for their hypocrisy. It was the same type of hypocrisy that I always assumed was part of all religion, but especially Christianity. So here I am kind of siding with him. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Might even be true, but I don't want it. So the only thing I knew to do was start reading it again. And I was about halfway through now for the second time. And there was a certain point of theology that I couldn't really grasp. And it dawned on me that maybe I don't need to have answers to every question today, but I wanted to take stock. Okay, what do I believe? I realized that at this point, I was reading no longer as an inquirer or as a skeptic. I was reading as somebody who was pretty much on board with the message. In other words, I believe this. I had just been reading about Jesus in the New Testament, and I was saying, yes, I agree. I want this. So I prayed. I need Jesus as my Lord and Savior. And God not only heard my prayer, he answered it immediately. And from that moment on, I became a new person. All of the stuff, combination of spiritual issues, psychological, emotional, nature, nurture, was lifted, and I was set free. It's now been 37 years. I've had challenges like anyone else, but I could say in all this time, I have not once thought about suicide. It's not a fad. It's not a phase. He didn't come to turn bad people into good people. He didn't come to make us religious. He didn't even come so that people suffering from severe depression can feel better, although I could tell you that's a wonderful bonus. But ultimately, he came to give life to spiritually dead people. All of us, because of sin, have separated ourselves from God, and Jesus came to provide the unique solution. This is a message of hope in an otherwise hopeless world.
Okay, no, I didn't want to play that. It was too dangerous. So let's see what we.
Soy latte for Greg Callister, born on the 9th of February 1987. Mother's maiden name Smith. First pet was Patrick Swayze.
There's no need to overshare personal details. Connect ID.
Yeshua was his name. I go to sleep one night and I hear my mother waking me up and saying, "Yeah, Kumi, Kumi, Yeshua Mashiach." She says, wake up, Yeshua is the Messiah.
Oh,
Hi, my name is Liat. I was born and raised in a suburb of Tel Aviv, in Bat Yam. Right after I finished my military service, I decided to travel to the United States. And then I met my husband, who was...
Good night, Lynn. God bless. Diane, that's absolutely perverted, that Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Not Jewish, but it didn't matter to me. There was a connection. We both were seeking God, and everybody in the family was worried. How are you going to raise kids? And, you know, were you Jewish? And he's Christian. But I was very stubborn, and I was convinced that you can do it in a spiritual way, where we just both respect each other's holidays and each other's practices and all that. He really respected, you know, my choice to seek my spiritual roots and to understand them. You know, our son was turning 13, and I really wanted him to be bar mitzvah. So the only place that let us have his bar mitzvah was an Orthodox Jewish organization. And they were so sweet and they were so welcoming. And I thought, maybe that's what I need to do. I need to become more like an Orthodox Jew, because they seem to know what they're doing. They know how to pray. They know God. The kids would go Sunday to church and Saturday to Orthodox synagogue. I started to realize at some point toward the end of this experience, there were some things that were strange. Well, first of all, I had a conversation with the head rabbis, and he told me that I have to divorce my husband. And I had a beautiful marriage. Besides this religion issue that was growing bigger and bigger as a monster in our family, we had love for each other and we were raising children. I didn't want to divorce him. Other boys, when they go out to read from the Torah, they would call out their names like Shimon, the son of Abraham. And when my boys would go out to the Torah, they would say, Noach Eliyahu, the son of Liat. Slowly I realized that as far as they're concerned, Greg, my husband, doesn't count as their father, and that was very hurtful. I went to Judaism to find God, and I didn't find him through all these rituals. And so I had this voice telling me, this is not God. And I love my people so much, and I wanted to belong to them so.
Yeah, Darren, the Essenes have more info on prophecy of Jesus coming than anyone else. Some people call them Gnostic. They're not Gnostic. That they're just really good. They call themselves light bearers, and they really were good light bearers.
Much, but I had a feeling, and I knew that I'm never going to be in a place where the father of my children is not welcome. So I still needed God. I did not want Jesus to be my God. I never even thought that he would be. So I developed this other God. I said, okay, I'm going to have something spiritual. It would be love, justice, honesty, and beauty. I really try to convince myself that that's going to be my God. And something in me in my life was breaking while my husband is really starting to develop this big faith in Jesus. He comes to me and he tells me, Liat, I believe in the same God that you do. I believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So I told him, well, if you do believe in the same God that I do, why can't you just be Jewish? Why can't you just forget about Jesus and all this stuff and be Jewish? And then we can just have a wonderful life together. In the house, Jesus becomes the enemy. Every book that he buys or he reads, if I see it, I turn it around or I stuff it in a drawer. He starts hiding it. He's learning and reading in secret. Here I am. I'm saying the father of my children is not going to be rejected. I am starting to reject him. I'm rejecting him. I'm hitting a place where I'm working really hard to be good, but I'm realizing that I'm really not good at all. That God that I invented is not saving me. I need someone to save me from this, and I don't know how. I'm breaking down. I go to sleep one night, and I hear my mother waking me up and saying, Liat, Kumi, Kumi, Yeshua or Mashiach.
You know they're genuine when they cry.
There are times that leave you looking for more. Expect more.
She says, wake up, Yeshua is the Messiah. That morning I woke up, something changed me. That was not a dream. I know it was not a dream. Because first of all, I didn't know who Yeshua was. I never heard that name. But I know she was talking about Jesus for some reason. I didn't know who was it. And then the next night, I go to sleep, and Greg was telling me, Liat, you're yelling Yeshua, Yeshua through your sleep. I knew that what he was saying was right. I just was afraid, that he would, what is he going to think about me? I told him, I think I believe in Yeshua. And the next night, I went on my knees and I said, Abba, Adonai, is this true? could you give me one more dream? I don't know. I said, could you give me one more dream? And I went to sleep and I had one more dream. And I woke up and I knew, I said, this is it. I know that Jesus is my Messiah. And then I knew that was what was missing, that in that fork that I arrived to, is that I was bad. And it was not that I was bad. I knew that I was not a murderer. I was not a thief, but I could never be on that level that is expected of me. No matter how much I tried, no matter how I exhaust myself, I couldn't. And that I needed a Messiah. I needed someone to save me from that. And the first thing that I did, that I woke up that morning after my third dream.
Trying to get the camera.
I wrote in Hebrew. I went to the computer. I didn't want any American, any English-speaking person to tell me about Yeshua. So I went on the computer and I wrote in Hebrew, Lama Yeshua. And I wrote, why Yeshua? And One for Israel came. And One for Israel, and all One for Israel's angels started to explain to me things that I didn't understand. You know, one of my biggest fears was that I will lose my Judaism, because I love being Jewish. They explained to me how Jewish believing in Yeshua is. And I did, for the first time in my life, I finally felt more Jewish than I've ever felt in my life. All of a sudden, also the gap between me and my husband was gone. I felt like, wow, I can see so clearly now. I was just a new person. I went to sleep hating Jesus. I woke up loving Yeshua. I don't know how to explain it.
Okay, I'm going to play this one later on when I hang up, guys. So I'm just going to load it for now.
By the way, I beat.
Okay, that's that bishop that got stabbed in Australia. I'll do one more of these Jewish guys. I'm going to hang up, guys.
Home loans are what we do it, Ram. So if there's a way to get you into your first home, we'll find it.
Very strong anti-Christian prejudice put in me by my mother when I was only 5 years old. When I was 5 years old in New York City, living in a Jewish neighborhood, one day when I was playing with my toys on the front step of the apartment building, there was a man walking down the street, and he was shouting out something, and he kept saying the name Jesus Christ.
Good night, Di.
And it made me puzzled because I had never heard that in my life before. And a little later, I went upstairs, and I said to my mother, I sat down in a chair, and I said, she was standing up, I said, who is Jesus Christ? And she acted like a rattlesnake just jumped up. She jumped back about 5 feet. And she said, oh, we are Jews. We are not Christians. We never say that word. And she got me so frightened that I knew that there was something about that name that I needed never say. And so that instilled an anti-Christian prejudice in me from the time I was 5 years old. So it was a very unusual feeling. I remember that so distinctly. It was right before I went to school in the summertime when I was 5 years old. And ultimately, I got curious. I've always been a curious person. Curiosity, they say, sometimes kills the cat, but sometimes it leads to enlightenment. So when I finally left home and went to the University of Arizona, and I was away from my parents, I began to study the scriptures. And I began to look for indications of the Messiah in the Old Testament. And then after about 3 years of study, I finally realized that the Old Testament was painting a picture of Yeshua. And I had such a prejudice instilled from my mother, such a prejudice against Christianity, that even though from a logical standpoint, from a mathematical logic, that's what my mind was in from studying mathematics. Logically, I could see it. However, I still had the prejudice. And I had to pray for 9 months. And after praying for 9 months, all of a sudden one morning when I was praying that this prejudice would go, in an instant, all of a sudden that prejudice vanished from my head. And I suddenly felt that the prejudice miraculously vanished. And when that happened, immediately the same day, I sought to be baptized. And only 2 days later, I was finally baptized.
And did your mother and your father, were they alive to witness this?
No. Well, they were alive, but not there. When I had spoken to a minister saying, do I have to explain this to my parents? And they said, wait until the time comes when it's necessary. Don't spring it to them as soon as possible. Just wait and have patience about it. And so finally, I got engaged to a believer. And when I got engaged, I had to explain that to my parents. My fiance and I went over to the house in another state. And right away, my mother wanted to know the background religion of my spouse-to-be. And I explained it's the same as mine. But she didn't know
cool,
what that
isn't he,
was.
Darren?
And so we got to talking about it. And my father got very annoyed. My father said, do never once ever talk religion in this place again. He didn't disown me, but he never wanted me to talk about religion again in his presence or in the house. And it was a rough time. He found out we were going to get married in a musician's hall, and we had a long 9-month engagement. And finally, I got a letter from them saying, since it's going to be in a musician's hall and not in the church building, they decided they were going to go to the wedding.
Wow.
And I told the minister, and we had a discussion about it.
Gee, that's lousy.
Say in the name of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which, although we believe that is Yeshua, nevertheless, it would be less offensive to my parents. And that's the way the wedding was conducted.
Wonderful. And give us your website again for people that want to check you out.
thebiblicalcalendar.org.
And that's your main website.
Okay, guys, I'm out. God bless.
Only free downloads of PDF files.
Wonderful, wonderful.